All right, so welcome everybody to this kind of special panel episode, Canadian Podcast Convergence. I don't know if you guys know, I know Teese joins us sometimes, but occasionally we get invited to this Union of the Unwanted. It's kind of like a bunch of podcasters and people really seem to like it. We just shoot the shit about stuff. And I thought, Darren and I have been getting more into Canadian content lately. We've been doing extra episodes on it because, for so long we didn't give a shit about Canadian politics, but now, or Canadian news and all that. But now it seems to it's affecting us all quite a bit. So we've been tackling it a bit, and we thought, why don't we do like a Canadian version of the Union and get some people that we kind of know are podcasting, some independent people. I mean, we're making a difference right now. I think the mainstream media is lying. People are waking up. I mean, I flip flop back and forth about that, of course, like everybody. I don't know if they're waking up or not, but it seems like it. We're making a difference. I mean, the media's getting caught in a bunch of lies. They've been covering for the politicians for so long. The corruption is off the hook. So I thought we'd get together, maybe talk about challenges and solutions. And, you never know if it works out. Maybe we can do more, invite more people, different people. But yeah, I really appreciate everybody joining us. I know some of us were kind of born or reborn out of the pandemic. So I think it's an interesting time in Canada, especially right now with everything going on. So we'll have people kind of jumping in and out as we go on here for an hour and a half or 2 hours maybe. But especially for the audio audience, maybe we can just go around quickly, introduce yourselves so people get a sort of a sense of the voice to who's talking, and then we can start shooting the shit about sort of challenges and solutions in Canada. Want to start with Zach?
Yeah, I'm Zach Schmidt. I am a podcaster from Saskatchewan. I have the Schmidt House podcast. A couple of you, Tanya and Graham yourself, have been on the show before. I talk about culture, politics for the most part on my streams. My older episodes that I did before I started streaming was a lot more trying to bring into the entertainment aspect as well to kind of attract an audience and kind of like, low key red pill people as they explore my other content as well. So that was kind of how I got into it. But I've been streaming for basically since August, doing a weekly live stream on Tuesday nights. And it's been going really good. I think I've certainly seen. Okay, sorry, my dog's decided to wake up right now. I have.
They do that.
Yeah, so my audience has kind of like really grown in the last little bit. So there definitely is a huge appetite for people that are seeking the truth and wanting to know things and stuff like that. So it's a good time to be in this space as long as we can be in this space because with censorship coming down, our days are probably limited here. So, but yeah, Schmidt House podcast, you can find me on Rumble.
Thanks, Zach. How about you, Sheldon?
Sheldon Yakachuk from Yakstack. So I'm Yakstack on Twitter, and I have a Substack under Yakstack. And I just started into this under statistical analysis a couple years back, and I'd hope to actually die off and fade into obscurity about a year and a half ago. And as it seems, there is, like Zach said, there's a large calling for more loud voices, and I'm working on that exact same thing. And it's just basically trying to get Canadians to stand up and lend their voices through a little cast that I'm calling Heartbeat. I want to hear the heartbeat of Canadians. I want to hear what people have to say, what they'd seen throughout the pandemic and where we're going through post-pandemic, scamdemic world. That's me.
Right on. Limina?
Hi, I'm Limina. I'm a recovering social worker counselor with about 20 plus experiences in working with children and adults with severe mental health. About 10 years ago, well, probably before that, but about 10 years ago, I started sounding the alarm of therapy and this mental illness structure combined with the trauma paradigm starting to cause harm to people. So therapy not only becoming not useful, but maybe even harmful to people. It seems to be making them weaker and smaller and less able. So I've switched gears now, and I'm working under a paradigm of personal stability. And so working in a more holistic model where we look at, you know, supplementation and you do look at health, but understanding the difference between men and women, and that talk therapy can be super gynocentric, and working towards resiliency, sort of the better campsite rule, having things be time sensitive and people coming out the other end actually better off than when they came in. And so there's two ways that I'm doing that currently. One is I've got a small Rumble channel called the Human Responsibilities Tribunal. And then I do one-on-one work with people online. So that's me.
Thank you. How about Tees?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me on. Good seeing you guys again. Like he said, we get together on Unity Unwanted. I have a tendency, because I have dual citizenship between America and Canada, to focus more on the human condition, not just the Canadian side of things. So I'm not great at being Canadian. Do forgive me for that. I'll apologize. At least that'll make it so I'm half decent. But what I do is I'm a writer, director, producer, editor, actor, and illustrator, and that all comes together in a show I've created called Conspiracy Synergy. And that's a quickening capsule of outreach tool for your friends and family who don't understand that the world actually is one big conspiracy. It is. It's just, generally speaking, people don't describe it very well. They don't understand it very well. And then you kind of just get vivid flashes of like Alex Jones screaming in your skull. And that doesn't help people with the emotional side of things. So the catalyst of what I attempt to do is to broach the subjects that we're all going through in an emotionally palatable manner for those who haven't realized just how brutal it actually is. And that's, once again, Conspiracy Synergy. And I also co-host the Wednesday segment, the Revolution Wednesdays, over on AM Wake Up. And that's another way to find me. So that and appearing on Unity Unwanted and hanging out on other people's podcasts, that's my whole thing.
Thanks, Tees. Truth Seeker?
Sorry, I had to unmute because both my dogs also woke up. So, and they decided to play right around me, like in my vicinity. But I'm Tiana. I'm Truth Seeker 01011. And I kind of took off during the pandemic because I used my sarcasm and my humor and my bachelor's of science and my master's of science to basically tear down the entire COVID narrative online. I had one account already taken away, so I'm rebuilding another TikTok. And I pretty much combine politics, esoteric knowledge, religious knowledge, and the matrix. And I combine it all so to show people how everything's connected from one point to the next.
Right on. Thanks. Freedom Convo?
Hello there. I am David, and I host the Freedom Convo podcast from Nova Scotia. And I started it in December 2023 for a few reasons, I guess, maybe two big ones. One would be the psychological war that we're living with in this country. And I'm trying to counteract that by using psychology a little bit, taking a look at propaganda and stuff. And also, you know, there was a vaccine mandate here in Nova Scotia for any hospital up until about a month ago. And my wife was unemployed due to that for 2.5 years. So, you know, those were two big triggers. And I was like, what the F is going on, right? So, and you know, really, I think it just comes down to the psychological, spiritual nexus where people need to really, we're not going back, I think is the issue. There's no going back to 2018, 2019 psychology. I think it's like a new metaphysical paradigm we need to build, and a very tightly localist, almost anarchist or agorist ideology. So our podcast, we just talk about these sorts of issues, look at solutions, but unfortunately, you have to diagnose the problem in order to apply the solution. And the problems are myriad. And I think we live in a crisis industry now, a global crisis industry. And that could be, there's many nuances to that. So maybe that's enough. And I do a lot of Nova Scotia news, Maritimes news and stuff. So I think that's it. I'll hand it over. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Darren, what do you want to say before we get going into it?
What? I wasn't planning on saying much. I mean, I guess I was hoping we'd do better in the vote today and maybe get an election going, but I kind of knew it wasn't going to happen.
What happened with that?
I think everyone voted against the Conservatives, including the Bloc. But it might be an interesting way to take the temperature, because I think Pierre's not an idiot. He could have easily slipped something in there for the Bloc, whether it's all the money that the Liberals owe him right now over health care, or the Bloc has a list of things that they're complaining about, and he could have just slipped them anything, and they would have probably supported it. So I don't know what he's up to. Maybe he's an idiot, but it could be. I mean, I'm sure he is, but he's going to be in power eventually, and we'll hopefully everyone around this table will find a bunch of things that he's doing wrong too. But we got to get there first. So I don't know. I don't know what he's up to. I guess it kind of, if anything, he's married the NDP to the carbon tax now. I don't know. If I was him, I might try throwing something in that had something for the Bloc. Maybe there's $6 billion from the federal government, or I don't know how he would word that in there, and something for these. The Liberals seem pissed off over the Jew thing, so I mean that might be a lever to pry on some way. But I don't know. I'm more curious to hear what you guys think. Is there even any point in watching that anymore? Is there any point in paying attention to this political thing? Because one of the big problems in Canada is that nobody plays what's happening in the House of Commons. So 18 or 19 out of every 20 Canadians, maybe more, they'd have no idea the kind of the joke that our parliament has become, and the lack of accountability there is to it all, because the media has been co-opted in Canada 100%, not like in the US, where, I mean, you could argue the US is 100% too, but there seems to be at least some real alternative voices in the US, whether they're controlled or not. But there's some big ones. There's some big ones that are pushing back against the big things, because probably for no other reason that they happen to be there. I mean, the biggest podcasts in the world are hosted in the US, and a lot of them tend to at least pretend to lean towards freedom, whereas in Canada we don't have that. There's really been nobody at all throughout all of this. I mean, even the Conservatives, none of them had anything to say when we were locked in our houses, and none of them really had anything to say when we were facing vaccine mandates. It wasn't until it became obviously politically favorable with the Freedom Convoy. I would argue at that point, it kind of, if you were paying attention, it became obvious that the majority of Canadians were on the side of that we were the silent majority. And then you sort of seen the Conservatives jumping on that. They seem to be doing the kind of the same thing with the carbon tax now, because they were all running on carbon taxes 5 years ago. They could argue hindsight might have made them change that, but I guess, is that so? In Canada, I feel like there's a value just to getting that out there, because like I've never seen that even growing up. It's never been on the news. They never been, hey, these are what these idiots are doing in Parliament. They ask each other questions and nobody really answers anything, and they just keep saying the same crap over the same talking points over and over again with really no advancement. And maybe it hasn't always been like that. Maybe it wasn't like that when I wasn't paying attention 20 years ago. Maybe they were actually having discussions in there, but they're not now. And seemingly they haven't been for at least 5 years. And, there seemingly is a value to showing the 95% who were real close to voting people like us into camps a couple of years ago. I would argue maybe a year away, another year of heavy propaganda, and they would have been ready to support the state in silencing people like us, by probably just about any means necessary. So, maybe there isn't a value there is a value in it to waking up some of those people, but I guess I'd be curious in where you guys think the solution is for Canada right now. Is it because if there was no solution in media, none of us would be doing it, right? I think we'd all be finding something else to do if we didn't think there was some value in getting behind these cameras and these microphones week after week after week after week after week and complaining. So I'll let Graham sort of handle how he wants to move around from person to person, so we're not talking over each other. But that's kind of where I'm at these days. I think there is a value that more people in Canada are paying attention to politics than ever, because I really do think that in Canada, at least, a big part of the problem is things were so good for so long that we just didn't have our eye on the ball at all, and we've sort of just completely handed the country over. And I think that some of taking that back involves the responsibility of taking responsibility for your country, whether that's complaining about that, whether it's getting, I mean, we can easily just say, yeah, politics is lost and this is lost. So what are we doing then? Are we just giving up? Are we going home? Are we waiting it out? So what are we to do in 2024?
Anyone can pipe up. Let's just sort of open it up. That's a good point and a good question. So whoever wants to talk about it.
I'm going to dive in here for a couple of seconds. Yeah, no, the House of Commons has always been a joke. And if you go through question period, you'll pull your hair out and just listening to about 7 seconds of it. If you spend any time going through the debates for the, what the hell was it? For the non-confidence vote today. Yeah, you'd be ready to hang yourself or start taking hostages. It was actually pretty pathetic. They're going along on this, this existential threat of climate bullshit. And when it boils down to it is 70% of Canadians just like don't even believe in it. 59% of Canadians are not on board with the whole climate scam. 70% don't want to see the increase. Polyev, he didn't make a mistake in what he was doing. He called the non-confidence specifically around the increase in the carbon tax. There's 1,000 things that he could have called that thing around. He did this very specifically, is that he needs a super majority. The Bloc is always going to be tied to the Liberals. The NDP is always going to be tied to the Liberals. So they are the one big coalition party against the Conservatives. So what he needs to do is like you said, Darren, is he needed to marry the NDP to the carbon tax so that he could actually have a platform to get a lot more people skating away from the NDP. The NDP and the Liberals right now are splitting on a couple different subjects. One is the union vote. The NDP was formed under supporting the union inside of Canada, and it's done a great job at that. So over the last short period of time, and I'm sure the Freedom Convo podcast, sorry, I forgot your name, dude from Nova Scotia, you'll be able to weigh in on the fact that the Liberals are actually starting to support the unions a lot more, so they're trying to steal that vote, whereas the NDP are now working towards supporting the Muslim vote in what they did for the Gaza thing a couple of days ago. So there's a little internal turmoil that's going on between the two parties on the support they're trying to get from the Canadian side of things. Sorry. And they know that they're spiraling downward. So I think what Polyev did today was to rile the masses. It was very intentional. It was very specific, and I'm not really sure how I feel about the idea. It does kind of fall into the rage politics side of things, but at the same time, if we're not waking some people up, what the fuck are we doing? I mean, people have to start paying attention to what's going on inside of their country with the cost of living, the mass immigration that's driving our healthcare system into the gutter, our school systems into the toilet. People have to wake up. And I think that strategically speaking, if I was to take a guess, Polyev is just trying to wake people up. He's already got the support. He's already got a majority. He needs a super majority because he knows that he can't rely on any of the coalition parties to help him pass anything through the House.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Build on that?
I have a quick thought. We were watching it today, my wife and I, and I said, "That's it. CPAC is banned from this house. We're not watching this bullshit anymore. But we're completely detethering, as if we weren't already completely detethered." we run a homestead and we grow food and we whatever. We're pretty anarchistic in our approach, or at least I am. So I think solutions are very personal things, aren't they? And there's many problems, and many of them are large. Human life being one of them, in general. So solutions are many, yeah, I guess. If you look deeply enough, there are solutions, and there's things not to be afraid of either. But those things are just coming to my mind, and so I've not watching this show really, and mostly I watch the body language of the people sitting around the person who's talking. They're on their cell phone, they're asleep, they're giggling and fucking around in there, not dressed appropriately for the fucking job. Red sneakers and bow tie, Mr. fucking maid promoter, what's his name? I don't even know the fucking names. But you know who I mean.
Garrettson.
Holland? Anyway. That's all I have to say is that it's banned. we're not paying attention anymore. My community and my home and the things going on inside of me are like sort of a solution in my mind. If those things could be put decently and in order, I could be of some service outside of that area. So that's how I approach all of these things. Maybe spiritual first, but I don't know. It's hard to change that. I think it's a joke paying attention to this fucking bullshit. Over.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, maybe everybody has to go through their own, their own thing, and the people that need to see that for a while and to realize what a joke it is need to see it. Because people aren't seeing it and they don't know it's a joke. I mean, I like the numbers that Sheldon threw out there, the 70%, but half the time I wonder, is there really that many people waking up? It's like a flip-flop back and forth. Does anyone want to add anything to that?
Yeah, Graham, I'll pick it up as far as Freedom Convo. I appreciate your perspective insofar as the anarchist agorist approach and the metaphysical paradigm shift that needs to come into being, and what the very idea of government is ritualistic mockery of the slave class, and that's really all we are. So continuing to tune into it is kind of just them mocking us, and that's where we're at. The more in which we participate in the ritualistic mockery, the more in which we continue to bow to their decree. It's absurdity. Fuck this shit. What are we doing? So the idea of people waking up, if it's actually a spectrum, and it isn't something where you ever reach a point of attainment, it's an eternal ascension. And we're kind of caught in that like hopeful aspiration to do the best that we can. And that's easy to say when the lights are still on. But as we venture into crisis, people hit that base level fear kind of consciousness, the same kind of bullshit that we witnessed during the past few years. And it's a lot more difficult to talk to people then. And that's why it's important to have conversations like this to orient people for what real solutions look like, for what actual grown-up conversations are like. It's not waiting for the government to save you, for some sort of vote to be the thing that liberates us from the oppressive institutions we've lived under our entire lives. That's personal responsibility, it's accountability, it's community, and it's extending outward from that to pose national questions that aren't built off of superstitions like climate change being the thing that's going to kill us. It's stupidity that's killing us in allegiance to those who are ritualistically mocking us. So turn it off. It's fucking insane. Instead, go out there, build, co-create, and invest in other people who actually have the cojones to do it the right way.
I'll jump in on this too. There's a couple of ways that I would want to answer this, but I want to simply put it to kind of echo what you guys have been saying. In Diagolon, we talk about tribe and train, and that nobody's going to come rescue us. So we have to be willing and able to be able to find the people and the associations to be able to tribe up, train our skills, train our abilities, train ourselves to be able to weather the storm. Because if you think that checking a box is going to make any difference, it's not. We've talked about the political theater that, I mean, Polyev is playing the game very intelligently, but he's playing to the normies. And, I think content creators, even in our sphere, prey on that. They know that they can attract an audience, but they're not willing to actually speak about the right solutions. And the further left that it keeps on pushing, and I would call Polyev left of center and the conservatives left of center. They're certainly left of the Chrétien liberals back in the 90s. So, I mean, when you're looking at it holistically, the more that needle gets turned left, nationalism is going to be the only thing that is going to be able to naturally come and be able to solve that, because eventually there's going to be a group of people that get fed up with immigration, get fed up with the monetary system, get fed up with politics entirely. And it's those people that are really going to push the needle to where it needs to come back. And I don't think that the people are really going to want that, but it's almost going to become out of a necessity just because we've had the societal apathy to be able to create and nurture that. And there's lots of different cases where people have noticed that as well. Just when you have the level of degeneracy taking place, if you look at specifically things around like the gender ideology and arguments around that, it's just the way that it's going to be. So again, to kind of shortly answer it, it's like we need to tribe up, we need to train, find your tribe of people and work towards building something parallel to it, because this system is coming down and it's going to crash hard.
I disagree 10 out of 10. I'm sorry, man. No, the infiltration of the Canadian political system happened from within. They slowly overtook it. And what it was the woke starting to infiltrate inside of all of our small communities. And there's one large group inside of Canada, inside of our province, Take Back Alberta, run by David Parker. And he seems to get the premier's ear because he can organize a mass and he knows the system. And the biggest thing that he says, and I'm going to go through this, is that he'll go to one of his meetings and he'll ask how many people like what they're seeing when they have a drag time or drag hour story time. Story hour in their public libraries, and of course nobody is going to raise their hand. And then he asks how many of those people are on the board of the library. And of course, none of those people raise their hand. Well, how do you think those things get passed? Is because these places are loaded. The boards are loaded with people that are okay with this, that are along those same lines. If you want to organize, you don't organize outside of the system, you organize inside of the system. You use the system in the same way that they've used the system against us. What we need to do is we don't need to move away from it. We need to take it back. We need to expose these people for who they are and what they're saying. We need to go out inside of our communities and spread these messages. And that's a lot of what I'm working on now. Now I've talked to David Parker, had a couple of conversations with him, and it's not just him, it's with other Canadians. And when you start mentioning some of the things that are going on inside of the political circles, people are completely oblivious to this. They've turned off the news because they got tired of listening to COVID. And if you look at what we have for legacy media, it's self-destructing inside of Canada. Bell just laid off 400 or 600 or 400 employees. CBC in Q3 or Q4 of 2023 laid off 600 of their own. Now, CBC is owned by the country. It is Pravda. It is, they can't support themselves based on $1.5 billion taxpayer dollars. They're dying, but people are still searching for the information. And when you talk to women, or you talk to men, or you talk to parents or grandparents about, taking their child to a swimming location, a taxpayer, a publicly funded location, and they know that their daughter, granddaughter is going into one of these rooms and there could be a man inside of there. They're upset about it. Well, being upset isn't enough. You have to be willing to do something about that. And that is willing to stand up and give your voice. Now, we reach out to our political class by email, by snail mail. I invite them onto my shows, onto my town halls. I have the conversations. I go out into the public spaces and talk to these people. And it always comes back to the same thing. If we want to change things, we have to change things within the system, because the system is not going to change around us. Sorry, I don't mean to rail on you, Zach. I really don't. But in all the same token, things changed because not because the system changed. The system has always been the same. They learned to work with inside of our system to take things away from us. Now we have to pay attention to what they've done and take it back.
I'll disagree with you on some points because by your own accord, the old system is failing, yet you're saying we need to take advantage of it. If you're by that means, we should not defund CBC. We should take the power back and utilize CBC as our propaganda is basically the realm of thought that you're thinking. Now, there is lots of examples in Canada right now where people are using decentralized systems and pushing back on the old guard. One big example right now is Bitcoin. Everybody's going crazy over Bitcoin because it's jumping up in the marketplace because it has some type of intrinsic value that isn't attached to the fiat currency system that is run by the Rothschilds.
By everybody, who do you mean? People that are online, or do you mean the families that are down your street? Because I don't think the families down your street even know what Bitcoin is, wouldn't know how to sign up, and couldn't give a shit less. I disagree with you 10 out of 10. We're an online group, so we understand the online metrics. You go and talk to your neighbors and ask them about Bitcoin, because I'm going to tell
ask
you
them
something.
about the fiat monetary system. They won't know about that either.
No, and then that's exactly it. And it's the same thing with taking over CBC. Why would you take over a burning house?
But you're saying we need to take over those institutions. We need to build parallel to it. How can you say that on the same hand that these systems are failing and then want to take advantage of them? The political class could be upseated.
I'm not saying take advantage of CB. It's a dead breed. Journalism is dead. Legacy media is gone in the country. We are.
So why aren't we building something parallel?
We're not building something parallel. We're taking over the inside systems inside of the government. We're taking over boards. We're taking over government. We're reaching out to the people through the same means that they've taken over our systems. Go look at, be a part of your community. Go to one of your town halls for your community.
I do every single time.
What's that?
I do every single time.
Okay. See, and those are the places that we need to, and I'm not going to say infiltrate. Those are the places that we need to go. Those are the places that we need to have a voice. Those are the places that we need to raise awareness. You know, what Freedom Convo was talking about, he shut CPAC off in his house, which I can completely agree with. But at the same time, if you don't expose the lunacy, you don't expose these assholes for what they're saying. How many people supported anything? 70% of Canadians do not agree with anything that was said inside of the House of Commons today, do not agree with the vote. We don't get away from that. We don't get back into power by letting people ignore what these people are saying about us and what they're saying to us. They're talking down to us. They're fucking mocking us. April 1st, our life gets more expensive. They're mocking us. And when people realize that they're the butt of the fucking joke, that's when they stand up and they say, you know what? I can't afford my rent. I can't afford my mortgage. I can't afford my groceries. I can't afford swimming, dancing, soccer for my kids. And that's when they stand up and they say, enough. That's where we go with this. You don't get away from it by ignoring it or by separating yourself.
We're surrounded by people that are going to support us all the way down into a communist fucking dictatorship. The people in this country are supporting the holes in the system. They're supporting stupid things. Capitalism rises systems because everybody rises up when there's wealth and there's free trade or whatever. I'm not an economist. That's not my thing. I talk more about psychology on my show, but you can't help but wonder about this political system, this paradigm that we're currently involved in, for fuck's sakes. Look around, the vaccine pass, that happened. That was the end of your freedom, my friend. Now we pay for it. And I'd fucking start planting some carrots if I were you. I'm not mocking you. I'm just saying I don't vote and I never have and I never will.
Carrots are terrible.
Yeah. But I don't know, man.
It's like one of the worst vegetables on the planet. But I hear what you're saying. No, I know where you're going.
And I just one point, and I'll hand it over. But so we will pay for the loss of our freedom. We're seeing it now, and I'm going to use J.R.R. Tolkien here to point out the fact that even Sauron, everyone was afraid of. These globalists, they have a weakness. This system will collapse upon itself in time. They always do. Communism is fucking stupid. It's fucking stupid. And that's where we are. So that's why I'm not paying attention. Over.
Sheldon, you speak of the notion with rightful contempt of any governmental institution that can fly in the face of the will of the people and yet simultaneously clamor for such power. Isn't that insane?
Our complacency is what got us here. Tease.
No, our allegiance to an insane system is what got us here.
No, our complacency is what got us here. Somebody said earlier that, you know, everything was going so well before we stopped paying attention to it.
Nothing with that was ever going well. It was always
Yeah, no, it has not been good in Canada for a very, very long time.
So I mean, like, if
you know what, and it hasn't been going perfect, but we're not in the state of the world that we are now. I mean, 8 years of Trudeau, and I mean, this is only really ramped up in the last, what, 2, 3 since he's got the coalition on board. Come on now.
Decades?
Come on now,
Decades or years?
It's
so
definitely
talking about with years.
It was definitely going better 20 or 30 years ago than we're heading into in 20 or 30 years. I'll tell you guys that. Because we're 30 years away from food shortages.
Peanuts inside of schools and peanut butter.
Yeah, that's true.
Like that's when we started to cross the Rubicon for sure. Because I mean, from there it went to, you know, we're banning Christmas, and then now we're banning fucking Halloween. No, it's not that I disagree with what you're saying, but at the same time, when we thought things were going okay and we were busy and, you know, struggling to achieve somebody else's dream, and we thought that our kids could just gleefully go to school and that our neighborhoods were safe, the world was a better place. And we're not in that place right now. And that has ramped up over the last couple of years to proportions that nobody inside of Canada has ever seen. Now, we can talk about this until you're blue in the face. Canada has never, in the history of Canada, been in the state that it's been in, and this has all happened over the last 2 years. Don't go back decades. Go back 4 years ago, and then go back 3 years ago, and then hit 2 years ago, and then see where we've come from then.
Well, insofar as the state of Canada and the condition of horrific, immoral, ungodly cruelty unleashed upon the people, I think if you ask the natives, they might have something to say about it being worse once upon a time. And the entire ideal of the colonial entity that we exist in being little other than an illegitimate and bullshit paradigm in which people who were afforded the luxury of existing within that system under the decree of the crown, who, by the way, still owns about 80% of the land in Canada. So we've never been anything other than a front PR organization for the Anglo-American establishment. The notion of sovereignty is a lie that is told to people so that they'll continue to exist in the comfortable bubble that was built for them to incubate their delusion. The entire fucking system is evil.
And so then what the fuck are you actually looking for? Like, what action you looking for?
Described it.
This is a great acceptance inside of every system. But I mean,
this is the big question, though. This is the big question. I mean, I'm glad we've hit it now. It's good to have this discussion. I mean, inside or outside the system is one of the big questions that keeps coming up. But let's give Tiana here and Limina a chance to pipe it.
I'm finding this conversation absolutely fascinating because you have 3 different personalities who are at 3 different stages of the awakening in their journey, and they're seeing it from that perspective. And so I'm listening to everything and I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense from that perspective. And then this makes sense because this person's more awake. And all I have to say is I started an initiative to make a parallel society that is not anywhere near the broken system that it is right now. And because the system is absolutely broken and we are being pretty much pinned against each other for their pleasure and for their entertainment, basically entertaining any of their ideas, I find a waste of time. So that's why I keep telling people to go on a local level, build a local community where you can actually have a backfall in case when the government decides to go full communist on us, and they will. And eventually it will tear itself down. It always does, because what happens is the snake eats itself and eventually gets so close to its own head that its neck will start fighting back. It can't bend anymore. And the fight will be between the government and the corporations, and it will be an absolute shit show. It will come down. And as long as we have a safety net of a parallel society that we want to actually build for the betterness of humanity, we can fall back on that until that system completely falls apart. And then we can go in and basically clean up the mess and rebuild in the structure that is for us, not by them. But the system has always been broken because it was never built for us. It was built against us. And so that's one of the reasons we're looking at it on a federal level. It's all theatrics. Coming down on a local level, you have more control. You can actually talk to your politicians, talk to your local mayors, even though that's iffy. But trying to take a system back from itself is, it's dependent on each human being. And some people are more corruptible than others. So unless you're going to rebuild the system with pure-hearted human beings, which is almost impossible because no one is 100% pure, you will eventually get the same system that we have in place that is pretty much the screw up that we have now.
Sorry to interject. One quick question. So how do you build a parallel to that then? If everybody's corruptible and there's no true people out there, if you can't replace the system that's already existing, how do you build a parallel to that exact same thing?
Well, you're not building an exact same, you're just building a system parallel to it. And the system parallel to it, you're not building governments from scratch, you're building a community where your own interests would be best to be honest with your community members, because on a community level, when liars and thieves come into play, they get pushed out. That's why we've always been tribal. That's why it's always fit in so that you can have the greater numbers. Whereas the federals are so far away from our reality, so dislocated from us in every day, that it would almost be impossible to have a group of people work towards one goal when there are, you know, incentives or presents being given from a corporation to have that person turned. So when you talk about on a community level, it's if I open up a store for my community and I'm selling the vegetables and the eggs that I grew, I'm not going to screw over my customers because I won't have any customers. Whereas if I'm trying to fix a political system, I now have to pretty much make sure that no one will say yes to extra bonuses, cars, to corporations so that they don't sway the vote. So we're kind of comparing apples to oranges in that sense of the way, but the system will eventually break in on itself because the snake always tries to eat itself. It gets close to its own head, and then that's when it starts to regenerate and the cycle begins all over again.
Sounds exactly like what you'd create instead of a parallel system.
Well, the system's already.
I'll give you a real example of something that we're building that is a parallel system being happening right now. So there's a guy in Nova Scotia, and Freedom Convoy, you should reach out to him. His name's Chet Chisholm. He was he's a paramedic that got fired over the jab, and he was actually vaccine injured, and he's got heart problems and a bunch of other stuff. Him and a bunch of other fired paramedics have started their own private ambulance services because the healthcare system in Nova Scotia is so messed up that they're literally having firemen trying to do CPR on people outside of the hospital. There's cases of this. So it's gotten so bad that they're starting their own private system. And you're going to see there's 3 anarchists sitting here on this show today. And they're going to love this too, but the cops are going to be the exact same thing. When the cops are saying that you're going to have to leave your keys outside so that the thieves can steal it, there's going to be people that vigilantism is going to step up. You're going to have privatized policing. You're going to have privatized paramedics. And it's purely because the current system has not been able to solve for that problem. So there's going to be a vacuum and something is going to take its place. Having a parallel system and building that is the only natural way that it can do it, because like Tiana said, you cannot replace that because it's a junk system to begin with. You can't infiltrate it. It's lost. It's like cancer. You don't be like, okay, well, we're just going to take the cancer from your leg, cut it out, and we're going to put it something else. We're going to give you like a different type of cancer because this one's better, right? You have to cut the leg off, and that's where we're at.
You can't have democracy and you can't have any form of government, but we all have to accept that comes with a level of personal responsibility. That's the 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 people need to be gone for that to work. I mean, Teese, you were talking about natives as the Indian in the room. I'll be the first to say that the Indian thing doesn't work with the numbers that we're running around North America in right now. It just doesn't work. You need 9 out of 10 gone, because you're talking about running when Indians do the winter thing. We break up into clans. You're talking clans of 30, 40, 50 people at a time, because that's the only real amount of people that you can feed off the land. It's only in the summer and in the fall that you're meeting up and the whole band is getting together, because during your during your harvest and things like that. So do you let in any sort of agriculture into because here's the thing is we're going to do the new system. It's going to happen. It's already, you're talking about the snake eating its body. It's already happened. I mean, if I'm a firm believer that this shit broke probably somewhere between 20 and 5 years ago. It definitely broke completely now, and it's tweaking out. We've got maybe 5, maybe 20 years before it breaks completely, maybe a lot less than that. But in Alberta, we almost had the power go out during a freeze this winter. Now we can say that's because of this or it's because of that. Now I think it's because of competency crisis. We've already outstretched ourselves to the point that we can't run this system anymore. Now, maybe it was always set up against us, like T said, maybe it wasn't, but I don't think we could get the people into place now to fix this thing. And it's not just the government. You can't get the people into place to keep the airplanes flying. You can't get the people into place to keep the supply chain working. You can't get the people into place to keep the farming and the agriculture working on a level to keep the export and the import businesses moving to feed the people that we, and Canada is a perfect example of that. When I was a kid, even, I don't know how old you guys are, but when I was a kid, there was no like out of season oranges and apples. It was like root vegetables and stuff like that over the winter. It was the farmer's market. There was no supermarket in my town when I was, as young as I can remember. There wasn't even a supermarket. So Canada is kind of especially susceptible to these supply chain shortages. So what are you guys doing to A, do you agree with me that it's coming down, and B, what are you doing to prepare for that? Because the one thing that we all seem to be able to agree on here is that it's coming down, and whether it's this week, next week, or it's just coming down enough that we can co-opt it and build it back up. But I think we've passed a point of no return in Western civilization.
Let's get Limina to start us off with this.
Hey, thanks for that, Graham. I guess I would say, as the other Indian in the room, we're half, I guess. I don't know if I qualify on the spectrum, but I would say that, just a couple political things piggybacking on everybody, and then I'd like to get into my own wheelhouse of, personal stabilization and emotional health. But I'd like to, I do think there is some interesting things that everybody's throwing around here, but I think it's likely that the big countries are going to split, and we're going to see several different types of systems come up out of it, and countries or communities or states get smaller. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that people are going to balkanize, and there'll be several different ways. And as far as the good old days, I mean, just anybody that's seen the corruption and the broken promises of these governments to everybody for decades, the scaffolding of a rotten system was put in place years ago, and people have just built off of it. So I guess I would just say that I think that we're going to see not one, but several different systems arise based on the communities that we live in, possibly even just the geographical communities. The second thing I'd like to say on politics is it was, in my mind, absolutely no mistake that the RCMP document saying that Canadians are angry and headed towards revolution was released anonymously. At the same time, the vote of no confidence over carbon tax came out. That really plants a seed of a psychological seed that says to people, if you vote for Pierre, you won't have to revolt, because we're going to take some of this financial hardship away, because the document stated that it was largely around cash-strappedness. So I think that those two things work synergistically as sort of a settle everybody, sort of a placation, right, of the masses. And then from there, I guess I would just like to to talk a little bit, like we've talked about some big things and we've talked about some smaller things, and I'd like to build on the ideas from Freedom Convo, Teeth, and Zach of like, you know, it's not an all or nothing sort of idea. And I really can respect that. In our house, the conversation has been around how much time do you spend on the macro and how much time do you spend on the micro? And it can't be all the fights all the time of the United Nations and big government organizations that, you know, it's going to take hundreds of thousands of us to go up against. And we can't do it if our families are falling apart. We can't do it if our children haven't even been taught to tell the teacher no, let alone stand up in dissent in some sort of you know, group environment. You know, I was talking to a boy, a young man who didn't want the vaccine, and we talked about several different ways because I gave free counseling to any of the post-secondary kids that defied the mandates. And at the end of it, he just said, I want somebody else to stand up for me. And I thought, wow. So, I mean, really, when we look at a do-over, we need to decide as individuals and families of like how much of the fight is going to be on the macro and how much is going to be in the fortification of ourselves. So one, that we can have people in our families and our communities that feel safe and strong enough to go up and dissent, so that we can produce people that are such an asset to our communities that it makes the community stronger to go up. And I think we've really failed at our young people, and we also have to be strong enough ourselves to fight the battle too. So in our house, we've thought about it as like a 20% needs to go to showing up at the community gathering, showing up at the bigger fight, showing up at everything, and 80% has to be at fortification of the self, because if all those other things fail, we need to make it through this, right? So I'm not sure if that built on any of the ideas you guys had before, but I just, that sort of all or nothing thinking, we're going to head into this system, it's going to be this parallel system. I don't think that's true. I think it's going to be a lot of different systems with a lot of different ideas, and that all or nothing thinking of you just got to fight this battle over here and you just got to stand up over here, it's probably just going to be a mishmash of a multifactorial approach from a lot of different peoples, from a lot of different views. And hopefully we're strong enough in ourselves to make space for that too.
Yeah, that's well said, Lemon. And it's the other thing is it can't just be online. I mean, we can fall into this rut of just being on the internet and complaining and things like that. And you know, we were talking to Charlie Robinson a while ago, and he brought up a good point. He's like, you know, you can go here for the class, or people want to be in Mexico, or maybe they want to be in Florida, they want to be there. But when it all comes down, there's something to be said for home field advantage. And you know, part of this process is probably going to involve these phones not working at some point, or some of this stuff not working. So what is your plan to deal with that? And I mean, personally, I think one of the first things people need to be doing that I don't know, maybe we can all agree on, maybe we can't, is getting out of the city. And you know, you got to spend some time online fighting the good fight, whatever you think that is. If that's getting back at the government and taking the political route, I think that's great. That's important. I'm an anarchist, so you know, but that's a step on the way to doing that. You know, the state's not just going to disappear tomorrow. We need people in sort of all different sides of it. But I think we got to be thinking about getting out of these cities and being prepared. Like, where are you guys all fitting on the prepping thing? Like, do you guys think everything's hunky-dory in the supply chain? Like, it's fine to say this, that, and the other, but where are you guys at on, like, do you think you're still, where are you at from a prepping standpoint?
Can I pipe in on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Darren, let some people in from the room too, and go ahead, Tease.
From what room? There's
There.
participants.
I'll make it pretty quick. This is a world war. This conversation focuses on it from a Canadian perspective, but what's happening is the trial balloon regional disruption of different nation states' cultures in order to deliberately fragment them. And the idea that getting out of the city is going to solve our long-term problems, and that's not what you said, Darren. Insofar as the short-term problems, it is, I'd say, probably a pretty good idea. But the long-term problem here is actually transhumanism. And I'm not referring to that in the sense of the digital integration with human beings, because there are small pockets of that being beneficial. I'm more referring to the ideological underpinnings of the transhumanism movement, which is basically anti-human. It's about murdering people and making them fall in line with these various different institutions that birthed the technocratic control grid in order to build to this period in time. Much like the project for the new American century was a 100-year plan, the very shitstorm that we're about to go through is the United Nations segmenting of the population into parsecs. It's not government so much as it is the structural segmenting of people, like you're cutting into a product in order to then figure out what's going on in each respective demographic to then specifically target them. And that's not going to go away. Whatever we do on a local, individual, regional basis based on the resilience of our communities and the competencies of our ability to go out there and lead is nevertheless going to be beset by this global threat henceforth moving forward. That's a reality. So
I disagree with you on that. I think they've already broke it. I think that the quote unquote rulers or the elite, the people that have set this thing up, I think they're suffering from the same competency crisis as the dude that can't fucking figure out how to get your luggage onto the same airplane. They're not gonna.
I think that's the front.
It's all
class.
It's like, all coming down.
No, bro, that's like the buffer of foam in a multi-layer system of armor.
Yeah, I used to think that too, but I see no evidence that there's anyone anywhere in the chain that knows what they're doing.
Bro, oh my God, I could go at length for the evidence. We could talk later about that.
Let's get Jason in here. Jason, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Introduce yourself quickly, and we're just getting into like whether the solution is within the system or outside the system. I don't know if you heard any of it, but some pretty good arguments and discussions in here.
No, thank you very much for having me, and apologies for being a little bit late. I just came off a podcast with Dr. Malone and Dan Fournier, where we were talking about Bill 63 and digging into it, global censorship. It was quite the episode. My brain is still spinning from all that information, but it was a good episode. So my name is Jason Levine. I host the show, The Levine Show, where I go around interviewing people twice a day, every weekday, usually 2-hour interview. So 4 hours of streaming a day, where I bring in a guest or two and sometimes three on, where we have incredible topics like just that one with Dr. Malone about global censorship. Yes, I just kind of cut into the end there, and I was amazed with what I'm hearing right now. And I certainly need to catch up on what's going on in this conversation, whether or not the problem's in the system or outside the system. But yeah, thank you very much for having me.
All right, no problem. So does anybody want to build on what Teese and Darren were sort of arguing about there?
I'd really like to build on that. I really heard what Darren was saying too about I think there's these platforms can be important for getting the message out, but I think he's really right about having real world experiences and meeting one-on-one in whichever way you can to actually build a real life scaffolding. I was so lucky to have been part of the Milk River blockade, and me and my husband we were down there for 2 weeks together living in the ditch. And I'll tell you that there's no group online of people, even if they have the same views as you, there's nothing like standing there in the face of those lines of the RCMP and the Fish and Game and the sheriff and the Lethbridge police, and know that you're surrounded personally with people who share your same values and that they've got your back. I think you don't have those same feelings online, even when you're saying the same things. And I think Darren is really, really right about, spending time together to increase your skills, but also to increase some sort of like camaraderie and shared value system.
I really like what you said, Lamia, Nina, about fortification of the self. There's a lot like you could build on from there, but I'm thinking about the engineered food crisis and how famines through history are very, very useful to the sorts of people we're dealing with. I believe transhumanism was thrown around here, and that's most definitely the biggest threat on the horizon in my book. I'm not eating that shit. I'm afraid to eat most of the stuff in the grocery store already. Thank you. So I don't know. It's hard to prioritize when they're at you from every single possible angle, even into your subconscious mind through this goddamn media that we got here in this country. That shit is dangerous and it's very powerful and it's military grade propaganda, and I would avoid it. So yeah, fortification of the self, take care of your mind, turn off this fucking bullshit. And I don't know, look at your health and well-being. Fortification of the self, it's going to help you stomach what I would predict are going to be very, very strange times. However violent or painful it is, I don't know.
How do you
But
build your
it's-
own island
Go
inside
ahead.
of the community, though? I mean, that's the whole thing, right? You're talking about fortification of yourself, and then we're talking about building alternate political systems inside of the same thing. They can't coexist. You're locking yourself inside of your own home, inside of your own commune. You're not reaching out.
No,
there's no political
I think you're misunderstanding the paradigm that I'm presenting here, Sheldon. If you look at something like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I'm not saying that that's true or not, but it's similar to that. It's not an island separate from itself. It's a stacking pyramid, with the bottom of the pyramid being the root that holds everything. It's the biggest. It's yourself and your family. If you're fortified, then on top of that, you build your family up. And then on top of that, the next step is your community. And then on top of that is, an organization of volunteerism. And then on top of that is the scaffolding that sort of runs the laws outwards. It's not an island over here, and then over here is the macro, and here is the micro. It's like it's a stacking mechanism. And unless you have really strong people on the bottom, then you have people in that macro system that give into corruption, that give into greed, that give into selfishness and narcissism. People that are fortified in the self and feel confident in their decisions and their ability to provide for their family and don't feel like they're going to starve, aren't going to be given so much to that corruption in their communities, scaffolding. So I think, I'm sorry if I was not clear, but I see it more as of a higher, sort of almost a hierarchy of, dissidence into the hierarchy of like the reclamation of our communities.
So literally exactly where we are right now. No, you want to build an ideal picture of it. I get that. We all do. And that's why I'm saying why rebuild the system when you can take over the system, when you can take back the system. I mean, you're talking from starting scratch to rebuild the exact same conundrum that we're already in. It makes no sense. It sounds like a lot of work, and you're talking multi-systems that'll fail because we've already gone through a history of somewhat, call them different political classes, different political systems. You want to recreate history inside of smaller communities to get to the eventuality of where we are right now.
I mean,
short of communism, short of socialism,
okay.
but at the same time, who is uncorruptible? Tell me what your price is, and that's all it takes. There's nobody without sin. Let them throw the first stone, right?
I'm not saying that, but I do think there are things that you can do to protect yourself against the corruption of yourself. And I don't think I even implied that that my view would be to rebuild the whole system.
Well, the first thing that you would do to remove yourself from the potential of corruption is take yourself offline. That would be it.
I think when people talk about a
Well, I
parallel
think-
system, I think they're not talking about building the same system. I think they're talking about building a simplified system. It's a different system. It wouldn't be, the same intricate, web of bullshit that's globally connected in a way, right? I mean, you would start local and build parallel systems to support yourself and not have to rely on, rely on as little as possible from outside your whatever radius,
Tell me how that's different from what we're doing right now. Because I honestly, I don't get it, man.
Because the political system is run by a bunch of globalists. I mean, it's all interconnected with what Teese was just saying. So the system is so broken. I don't know. I love the idea of fixing it from inside. So I was just thinking about that today or yesterday. I was like, we should be able to just fix it with inside without any violent revolution or without any separation. But I don't think you can. It's meant to be broken the way it is.
Well, yeah, exactly. Sheldon, can I ask you like a question to try and help you get it? Say that, and this is sort of just like a participatory.
You're going to try and ask me a question to help me get it. You're not going to try and ask me a question to help me get it. You're going to try and make a statement to help me get it.
Well, it's the Socratic method. It's the engaging of questions in order to explore like a realm of thought. So,
well, don't fuck with me, man. No, I know. I mean, like have your time, but yeah, the mental games are.
It's called a conversation, not a mental game.
Yeah.
But it's cool to frame it that way. I can just have it with myself. It'll go thusly. Hey, me, say that there are just two people on the entire planet, just two. And then one of them gets it in their mind that they're the government. Because they're the government, that means that they get to tell the other person what they have to do. Even if that person's just minding their own business. One person gets it in their mind that they have the right to control another person's rights. Is that moral? The answer is no. That's fucking crazy. Why on earth would someone get the idea that they have the right to control someone else's rights? Okay, let's say that it's three people. It's not just two. And those three people get together and two of them say that, oh, well, we're the government. And that other person is going to have to do what we say. And if they don't do what we say, well, then they're going to have to suffer the consequences of whatever we choose to do to them. Is that moral? No, even if they vote on it, it's just mob rule. From the very basis of the inception of government, which itself, if you go back to the Latin, is gubernare, it means mind control. On its face, it was broken by design as a slave state infrastructure, which is immoral, always has been. It gives you the illusion that if the right person wears the ring, then you're going to go out there and you aren't going to fall in line with Sauron. It's insane. So trying to save it is basically like saying that it's okay to invest in human slavery. Only it's that goeth mentality of none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe that they are free. Or Frederick Douglass's perspective that knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave. What's happening right now is the transition out of people who were raised in a cage to think that they have a right to tell other people how they're supposed to live, and the next generation just ain't having it anymore. That's the difference.
See, that's it. You just wanted to have a fucking conversation with yourself, and you're a complete fucking lunatic.
You wouldn't let me talk to you, so I did it on my own.
You're a complete lunatic. I mean, spend a lot less time in like fantasy garb and a lot more time in reality.
Well, we don't have to talk to. We don't have to call
like,
each other names. I mean, we could just keep it.
No, that's fantastic. When we reach the point of calling each other names, it shows that someone hasn't gone to the point where they're beyond it.
So anyway,
No, actually, just
my concern with that is I would have agreed with all of that a few years ago, but now here's a question: Are the masses because the government isn't my biggest threat? It's the masses. The masses are the biggest threat to me. So are the masses the biggest threat because of the government, or are the masses the biggest threat because the masses are idiots and that's always going to be the case? So my concern, because I am an anarchist, but my concern with the anarchy thing is I'm going to have to shoot a lot of people because the masses were the masses were my biggest problem during this whole COVID propaganda. I didn't have any run-ins with any police officers. Well, actually, that's not true. I might have had one or two. I had, a run-in or two at the border office, at the border crossing, but 95% of my problems were from my fellow people. So what do we do about them in this situation? How do we solve the problem that the general populace, and as near as I can tell, it seems to be the same throughout history, is that I mean, I can even catch myself. No, I'm not going to go that far
Be
right
careful.
now.
Yeah,
But
be careful.
but what do
I
we
wanna jump in here
what
for
do we
1
do
second
about the
because
fact that
I
the
think when you
masses
look
think
at
we're
when we
dangerous?
look at the way that it's been set up, we keep on talking that the system is broken. I think when you cross the threshold of understanding that it's not broken, it is actually functioning as intended. I think that'll shift your perspective on all of this because we're getting in a nitpicking battle of like this and this and this, and we're getting hung up on semantics for the most part. I think when we boil it down to the core element that we're all probably at least at some point recognizing is that the system isn't built for us, it's built for someone else, and it's running exactly how they want it. Unless we can kind of all see that same angle, I don't think that we're going to be able to have a high level of agreement. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah. Well, I want to get Clyde in here because Clyde, welcome to the show. Thanks.
Hey,
It wasn't
well,
like
thanks for
this.
having me.
It wasn't like this the whole time, but yeah, maybe just do a quick
What did I walk
introduction.
into? Whoa!
I snow globed the whole
heated.
fucking show.
Oh boy! Oh boy! Oh boy! Yeah, that went somewhere. We're talking about they're calling each other names and talking about shooting the masses. What? I don't want to shoot anybody. I don't want any parallel systems. I'm definitely here to encourage people to. Here's a problem that I find with a lot of people, they come and they start getting involved in political theory and politics, like actually getting involved in going out there, and they get disheartened because whatever, it doesn't go their way the first time they get into it. And I find a lot of people, especially people online, you get into circles and people are like, I'm fed up with it. It's got to go. We throw it all out, throw it, baby bathwater out of here, everything. Let's start fresh, or we'll all make our own little systems here. I don't think it has to come to that. I really don't think it has to come to that. A lot of times throughout history, yeah, it's gone through like cyclical things. I was just looking up a quote before the show started because I heard where the conversation was going, and this is a quote from Alexander Fraser Tyler. I actually particularly like this quote. It's he says, "A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of governance." Now, this was the norm for them at the time that this was written. It can only exist until voters discover that they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. Hey, does that sound familiar? From that moment on, a majority will always vote for the candidate promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result of that a democracy always collapses and over loose fiscal policy, always followed by a dictatorship. The average age of the world's greatest civilizations has been about 200 years. These nations have progressed through this sequence, from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from the great courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, and from abundance to selfishness. Well, we've been there. From that selfishness to apathy, and then from apathy to dependence back to bondage. Now, we don't always have to follow this cycle. Like this has been a typical cycle, how things work, but we see it other places in the world where they get a taste of what is obviously bad stuff. You see what Vietnam went through after the U.S. pulled out. I mean, U.S. involvement wasn't the greatest thing even at that, right? But afterwards, what happened? We became one of their biggest trading partners as Western countries, and we trade with them. They're doing better, and they're not doing amazing, but they're doing a lot better. You see what's happened in Venezuela is horrible. Hopefully they can turn it around, but South America has not all been like that. Look at Argentina right now. What was it? Only a couple of years ago, Klaus Schwab was bragging that he had them in their back pocket. You remember when he was bragging about Justin Trudeau? He was also bragging about Argentina at that time. It looks like they're turning things around. I hope so anyway. I've got a lot of faith that people can stop this cycle. They can realize, especially in the age of information, when information can get around and we can see examples being put out there, people can come out of it. I'm more optimistic than I'm pessimistic.
Quick question here for you, Clyde. Sorry to interrupt. Do you think we're in the age of information, or are we in the age of communication?
Okay, no, that's good. That's a good question. I think that we have more information at our fingertips. And I'm talking like even the layman has access to tons of information, copious amounts of information. Yeah,
I'm not saying that they don't. I'm just asking, do they look at that, or do they wait for it to be communicated to them? That's why I mean, are we in the age of information? The information's there, but people are more reliant, I believe, in the communication side of things than they are in the information side of things. And again, sorry to cut you off, man.
Yeah. No
All
problem.
respect.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of people are passive in a lot of aspects of the world, right? So you have a lot of things that you are your interests, and then you have everything else. You know, not everything that you rely on is something that you have an expertise in, or you even aim for expertise in. I'm an auto mechanic. I'm a perfect example of why people just don't worry about fixing cars all day or studying how to fix cars. They could get that information if they really wanted to, but I passively give that to them in the form of giving them advice or fixing their car. So yes, it is the age of information, but there is also specialization that we have throughout the world, through economies, through just relationships that we have with people. So yeah, not everybody is into politics or philosophy even. And it's interesting to get involved in, you know, these group discussions because a lot of people have different ideas. But yeah, I think we are in the age of information. We have more information at our fingertips. And again, so long as you want it.
Yeah, I like what
like-
you said there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I like what you said there. I think we're in the age, or we're getting into the age of dependency, and that's where we need to stop this, because that's where we can stop it. We need to be more independent. And I actually ran a poll just the other day, trying to find out who we need to work with or who we need to be worried about. So I ran a poll which asked, which group are you most concerned about and why? The way I isolated it was down to 4 groups. I had group number 1, which are the believers, those who believe the narrative and comply. Group number 2 was compliers, so those who know it's all BS but comply anyways. Group number 3 I called the regretters, those who are waking up to the lie and are starting to refuse to comply. And then the last group I identified here were the rejectors, those who knew it was BS from the start and refused to partake in the lie. And that poll got about 1,000 votes. And clearly the compliers are the biggest concern to most people because they know better, but yet they're willing to just do whatever it takes to comply with it. And I think if we continue to have a bunch of compliers, around, we're definitely going to get into the age of dependency, like with UBI and all this other stuff that's coming down the pipe. And if we do not tackle that one now, you're right there, Clyde, we're going to enter into the next phase after that, which is basically the end. So I push for independence and sustainability of yourself. You don't rely upon your government, and you be an independent person. So I run as an independent journalist. I run as an independent candidate as MP because I do believe the system. At least we should try within the system to repair it. And this is a conversation I had with Kyle Kemper just yesterday, Trudeau's half brother, where he was promoting direct democracy using technology. So connecting with your local area on a direct way using technology, so you can get direct input in a two-way road where you're hearing back from people and you're being able to communicate to them. So to kind of dovetail there to what Sheldon was asking, are we in the information age or the communication age? I think we're in the information age, and we need to get into the communication age. Because if we don't get into communication age, we don't have a chance to change anything. We're just going to be a bunch of compliers, really, or resistors. Sorry, go ahead.
So one of the questions I would ask that would tie in with both Jason and Darren that I'm kind of interested in is, we do know that about 60% of people will just do what they're told, whether they think it's right, whether they think it's wrong, they'll just do what they're told. And I think that's what you were alluding to, Darren, when you were talking about the masses, and you're talking, Jason, about the compliers. And so part of what interests me about, that discussion and a possible question is, if those people will always do what they're told, at some point in time it will switch. There'll be some sort of switch, because this is the human cycle, right? So we'll click along, and at some point this will fall and something new will come up, and those masses will likely be our masses.
Well, there'll be somebody's masses. That's the concern. Is I think that
there'll be somebody.
That
How do they
60%
make them ours?
is going to get round up by someone, and I don't even know if I could be trusted with that responsibility. I don't want the masses to be mine. But so here's what I would facet is, I think that that's probably not the right word. I probably sound like an idiot there, but I would posit that
Faucet.
this is the it's sort of the consequence of agriculture and the whole system that Tees is talking about being our problem. Once we started allowing, now this is going to sound bad, once we started allowing everyone to breed, everyone gets to have kids, and all those kids get to breed, keep breeding and keep breeding. And you know, for the Indians in this country, up until 300 years ago, it wasn't like that. It was, you know, you got to breed, and if you were willing to put all your resources into keeping those kids alive and getting food and getting your own food and doing your own thing. And this isn't just the Indians in Canada. This is all indigenous people are indigenous from somewhere, some point. This is where we all came from at some point, where there was some real barriers to entry, A, to being alive, B, to staying alive, and C, to reproducing. So the 60%, maybe, you know, maybe I'm just a crazy asshole, but you know, there's I think an evolutionary argument that our system has created this mass that now we can't control. It's like our own Pandora's box that we've opened with these, I mean, people can't want to whine about social. We're living in the most social, you know, socialist societies that have been around. Everyone gets a chance for the most part. Obviously, there's some outliers. There's some homelessness. There's some people on the streets, but for the most part, you know, we all know some fucking losers, man. That just get chance after chance after chance after chance after chance, and we're in the nobody falls off society. So, at what point is there? Do you guys think there's a consequence to no and nobody left behind? Is that can we have this anarchist society without somebody getting these 60% riled up to do something, right? It might not be the government. It could be Jim up the road because he's had enough of Bill down the street, and now the masses are his. Because I don't know that we can wake them up. You know, I'd like, maybe we can, maybe there's a certain percentage of them that can be woken up, but whether you want to call them compliers or masses or
I don't
NPCs
think they
or
need
whatever
to
you
be
want to
awake,
call them,
though.
but if they're not, are they a liability?
Yes.
Well, they'll
Huge.
just do what they're told, I think. I think they'll just
No.
comply to whatever it is, whether they're awake or not. I think that's pretty clear with the research is that there's 60% of people that will just do what they're told by whoever's in charge.
Well, the media,
Literally defines the age of communication over the age of information. We're not actually doing the research ourselves. We're following what other people tell us to do. It's the age of communication. If you all agree that 60% of the people are doing what everybody else tells them to do, that's not information, that's communication. The entire pandemic was run through surveys through legacy media. Every time they requested more masks, every time they ran a survey.
No, it's beyond that though, because no,
people
we're talking about people that will know it's wrong and still do it. I mean, we've got a ton of different studies of people that'll press the button and buzz the guy, even knowing, you know, they don't care. It's just because the dude in the suit told him to, because he was wearing a
they're just
white
following
fucking
orders,
jacket.
people. Those guys.
So
communication. That's
I've
not
been-
information.
I've been studying the CIA calls them sheeple, and the CIA has been studying the 60% for years now. And I have been absolutely interested in these people because you've got 20% who are completely awake, will be awake for the rest of their life. There is nothing you can say to them that will sway them from being awake or going to sleep. There's 20% who will constantly be asleep. They will be asleep for the rest of their lives. There's nothing you can say, do, prove, or show them. They will be asleep because they choose not to be. Those are the NPCs, or as you know, the CIA calls useful idiots. Those 20% will listen to anybody telling them what to do, such as like the media, the government, doesn't matter which side, because the 20%, it doesn't matter what their political affiliation is, their educational level or anything. There is something innate that you're either awake or asleep. The 60% in the middle are the reason why we have all of these issues. They are wakeable to a degree. However, they're cowards and don't have the backbone to actually stand up. So they will constantly go with the crowd. So they won't do what is best. They will do what the crowd does. It doesn't matter who says it. They will follow the crowd because they don't like rocking the boat, because they're too weak to stand out in the alone to be their own person and actually speak out. So one, I would not trust these people in my circle if we were to, like, let's say, fix the world, because any second they do not have that moral backbone to say, hey, this is wrong, I shouldn't do this. They look out after themselves first and their own personal interest versus the interest of the group, and they will do whatever they're told by any side as long as the majority are going in that direction. So I just find it really fascinating. A lot of people are like, well, do we trust them? No, not for a second. Because in a heartbeat they will throw you under the bus for their own safety and put you in a COVID camp.
Well, the mainstream media in this country is one of the greatest threats to all of us in the whole country, because they're everything you said, they're grabbing onto that and amplifying it to 1,000, and they're walking around still with N95s outside with the fucking Tim Hortons in one hand, smoking the other. It's all dirty, like, and it's fine. You know, it's fine. Some people just aren't there. Okay, but you're right. There's a group, and they'll do exactly what these experts like Timothy Caulfield and all the others say.
And they don't need the MSM.
You know, vitamin C is racist.
They don't need the mainstream media because they put all the Indians in camps without any of that shit. They did that with the church.
Sure.
So they'll use whatever
I think-
structure they
I
can
think there's
find.
a danger to labeling people masses or the 60% group, things like that. The way the world works actually is it's full of individuals, and individuals have all their own wants and needs and things that they're looking for, and you go talk to them. Like, you go talk to people that you think are NPCs and stuff. I know it's a fun joke, it's a funny meme to say that, you know, you're a non-player character, you just have a script tree. A lot of people just, you know,
it's not really a joke though, because 50% of people don't have an inner monologue.
Yeah, and it's not me labeling them. It's literally the CIA who comes up with the propaganda to use it on us. So
right. So,
yeah.
but people move based on incentives, and people actually do a lot of good things based on incentives if the incentive structures are correct. Now, I'm a big advocate for the free market. I'm a big advocate for. I'm not quite an anarchist. I'm more of a minarchist, maybe of, like, you know, the Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine persuasion. No, I've dabbled in that when I was a young punk rocker and all that stuff. And a lot of my punk rock friends came out the other side as socialists, and I went full, like, minarchist, you know, small government guy, you know. And this is kind of the way I've thought of things. When you meet people, they have goals, they have dreams, they have incentives, they have things that they want to do. If you give them an opportunity to take an out and take an easy way out, especially if they're kind of down and out and it's hard, you can get people caught into the welfare trap. I mean, Milton Friedman talked about this a lot. Thomas Sowell ended up picking up a lot of his work on this. And this is what puts people into a precarious situation where, you know, they end up in a trap where, you know, it would be a lot more work to get a little bit more money to get yourself out of it. So why not just sit down, relax, spend your time with your kids? It'd only be for a couple of years, and then a couple of years go by, and then you go to apply for jobs, and you're like, oh no, I got no experience over the past 2 years. Nobody wants to hire me. It's a trap. And this is what we're getting into, the whole idea of, you know, incentives and all that. So essentially, I believe that if people are given the correct incentives, if they're given the incentive, say via the market, that if you go work for somebody and you work hard and all that, I know there's still the 80-20, the Pareto principle, that only, you know, 20% of the people in any organization are going to do 80% of the work. And that's just a normal thing. And, you know, people in business have to get used to that fact and not take it out on their employees. They're just trying to make a paycheck and then move on with their whatever life. You may think it's mundane or whatever, and they're an NPC and they have just a script tree and no inner dialogue. But there's still people, and they're if you give them good incentives, they'll do good things. When we have largesse like this giant government, they'll gravitate towards that because it's the path of least resistance. Why not go towards that? All I gotta do is you know, get in a union. I don't have to do anything, and then I'll always make good money. I'll always have a good job, because the government's always going to be around. That's never going away. You know, incentive. If we have the right incentives, people will do good things. That's my opinion. I mean, history has shown that. And when there's perverse incentives, holy cow, will they do awful things?
Well, I do hear what you're saying. I think you were trying to say with the Pareto distribution, it's 20% of the people do 80% of the work is actually, I think what you meant there. And I do hear what you're saying about incentivizing things, and people are motivated on a personal level towards that. I do hear what you're saying as well about trying to meet people one-on-one as an individual. But when you look at social psychology and you look outside of those personal, like little bubbles where they're incentivized in their personal life, there is a mass a group psychology that starts to work, right? And we're talking about that. We're talking about, it's very hard because we're social creatures to pluck one person out when 90% of the people are saying go this way, and have them stand alone. That's where you get into mass delusions and mass psychosis, which can happen. The mob mentality is totally real. We've seen that play out over and over again. And one of the reasons that works is because, and this is pretty well researched, is that 60% of the population will just do what they're told. And maybe you could click that into, because it's incentivized, you could maybe click that into, it's just personality. People are born with different personalities, and some people don't love the rub of going against the grain. Whatever it is, and I don't like the term, and I just like the idea of like the social psychology of it. I don't like to downplay anybody, and I think it's really good, Clyde, that you put it in perspective of these are still individuals with aspirations who, we don't know what is going on, but nonetheless, psychology and mass movement of people in social circles is still, it's very well known, and it's still really out there. And I think there is an issue right now because that is the group that turned on people, that defied the lockdowns. That's the people that didn't know either way and didn't really care. They just felt like people should do what they're told. Those are the people that aren't taking on that information and incorporating it. They really want to do what's told. And it's true, in this world, there's followers and leaders, right?
Well, and I do
It's-
appreciate you
go
bringing that up, Clyde, and talking. This is why I can't be trusted with the masses, because I might do some terrible shit. And I agreed with you on the live and let live. I agreed with the live and let live 100% up until the whole the COVID era, because what I watched happen is me and my kids and my family be completely separated from society, not allowed into restaurants, not allowed into grocery stores. And while that was happening, I watched the general public cheer for it and smile and clap and yell at us when we didn't have our masks on, which is fine, But then the other thing I saw was even all of my buddies, all of them, not Graham, and not maybe ones I can count on one fucking hand, that might have said something and stuck up for me. You know what all the rest of them did? What are you gonna do? So I mean, I want to have as much compassion as I can for those people, but they don't have seemingly any fucking compassion for me, because I chose not to jump on board with their thing. And I don't think it had to be the jab. It could have been, anything. That's the scary thing, is I think it could have been anything. I think the health thing, that they finally figured out that's the real one. That's the one that, because they can try this and they can try that, but that won't really get Bill yelling at Fred. What will get Bill yelling at Fred is when Bill thinks Fred's going to get him sick. That seems to be the one that, even when there's no real science or anything, even personal evidence in your life for these people, like, I don't know, maybe I'm off base, and maybe all you guys know a bunch of people who, had terrible COVID outcomes, but in my reality, that wasn't really a thing. And there was nobody really in this sphere of public that was marching us off, that was I think could have taken that stance either and said, well, look, my uncle and my aunt and my this and my this all got taken out by COVID. That wasn't happening, but they didn't quite get there. But there was a point in January of 2022 where Graham and I were talking to each other, and it's like, what are we doing, man? How much longer do we have left? Because it's getting weird out there, to the point where it's like, I can't even start to talk about it anymore with the people that used to be my buddies, because even was getting weird. So I think, I appreciate your take on that, because I don't want to fall into other peopling. I really don't want to fall into that trap. But the problem with that 60% is they were so quick to other people us.
Government is the mechanism by which the masses abuse other people, right?
But if we don't provide them one, won't they just make their own?
Right, correct.
Or we'll just end up, it won't be a government, it'll be a king or an emperor or
right, correct. Totally. You're so spot on. So what that ultimately then becomes is an awareness of differentiating and delineating between rules and rulers, between systems and those systems which we have in existence right now, which are a dominance hierarchy built to suppress consciousness and enslave the species. That's what it is. And it's really difficult and excruciating to come to that point of realization. And I can understand why that's 60%. They just aren't willing or able to do it. And things are going to deteriorate, and then it's going to come to a head. And I don't know what direction that's going to go, but it really is basically people coming to an understanding that no one has the right to subjugate other people under their decree. Even if you have an alleged democracy, that's still mob rule.
Exactly. So by that, and I'm not trying to defend them, but you can almost see why they had to put something in place, because these masses are just going to keep burning the place down. What do we do about it? How do we prevent? So let's say we're going to do our new society. How do we stop the masses from burning the place down without other peopling them? Because I don't want to be like, hey man, well, if you can't pass our tests, then you're not coming in. How do we organically defend against?
Why is that a bad thing?
Why is what a bad thing?
Hierarchies exist despite government. Go to a playground, watch children. Hierarchies exist. Doesn't matter if there's a government or a set rule of or a set of rules in place. Hierarchies are always going to exist.
Yeah, no dispute. It's just whether or not we enforce and support the brutality of those hierarchies in a way in which they violate other people's rights. You're totally right that we're always going to exist in a dominance hierarchy in one way or another. And that's how it works. And hierarchy isn't bad. We can have leaders, we can have distinguished figures. That's important to be able to learn from them and to work within systems where we can work with each other. But it becomes very problematic when it's some people thinking that they have the rights to violate those of others.
Yeah, I don't buy the dominance hierarchy thing. It comes from a lot of Marxist theorism. I mean, the whole what is it? Critical theory was based on dominance hierarchies, and there are so many relationships in society that aren't based on dominance. They're based on mutual admiration, mutual respect. Look at business situations. There's no dominance hierarchy in that. It's you have the goods for me. I've got the goods. We can trade. We don't have to trade.
Are they taxed for those goods?
Oh, are you talking about the government stepping in between?
No, I'm literally just saying that they still exist within the dominance hierarchy. You're totally correct that you have that individual anarchy that's happening on a personal level, and it's very important to bring that into focus the way that you are, because the systems that we exist in are so massive that it's like fish in water. You don't even know that you're in the water. You don't see it anymore. But you're correct on an individual basis. It is just
no. I get the concept of the tax livestock. Like we're all chattel in this game of being tax livestock. Yeah, no, I get that. But so this is I try to be careful, especially around certain points of rhetoric, because this is critical theory. The dominance hierarchy keeps coming up. That's one thing. Power dynamics. The idea that every relationship is based around this dominance hierarchy, I always wanna specify that that's not a thing. This is where a lot of the woke culture stuff comes from. You'll hear intersectionality and all these other ideas that came out of the Marxist camps and that particular idea. But yeah, if you're talking about it on a different level, that's different.
Oh yeah, no, totally. Good point of clarification. I appreciate that. Thank you.
What did Zach say there? Zach said something. Does it matter if the system
Does it matter if the
implodes?
system can? No. Does it matter if the system is able to exclude people? There's a very misunderstanding of anarchy, and you guys might disagree with this because there's nothing. Anarchists and libertarians seem to not be able to actually agree on anything. But when you look at anarchy, it's simply a relationship, and the problem that we've all individually identified but haven't actually put that idea out there is the biggest problem is scale. We can't exist with now soon to be 41 million people under an anarchistic society. It will not work. It's impossible. So when you're looking at that, and when we're talking about parallel economies, or sorry, not parallel economies, but that's part of it, parallel systems that we're looking to set up, no one's saying that this has to be right across Canada. I'm a big supporter of Western separatism because I don't think that even there's a national identity, a cultural Canadian identity right across the country that can cohesively exist. So when you start trying to take it apart and yes, balkanize and kind of tear it apart into smaller systems, then you've regained your scale and you've regained your control over that system. It's no different. You're talking about kids on a playground. You might have 150 kids. That's a lot easier to maintain. What if all of a sudden it was triple? Right? Or 10 times as many kids. You lose control really, really quickly, right? And then what will actually happen, and they've done studies on this, if you look into the wolf when they reintroduced the wolves into Yellowstone, they put tracking collars on them, and they quickly noticed that the individual packs all just went their own way and had their own systems. There weren't lots of overlap as far as boundaries. That same thing can happen under anarchy and within these parallel systems. The problem that we're all trying to discuss is how do we fit it all into Canada? And I don't think that that's the right way to look at it. So to answer your question as one of my comment to Darren, why is exclusion such a bad thing? Why are we looking at that from a cultural Marxist lens where we have to be all inclusive and we have to welcome everybody? We can't save everybody. It doesn't matter in what system you try to do that. For years and years, we've been trying to solve for murder and we haven't been able to figure out, and anarchy won't figure that out either. But when we're looking at things and saying it's like, hey, we're fully functional with 50 people. That's what this system can contain. The carrying capacity of this environment is. Why are we saying that we have to let more people in? Right. So
I guess we're not. That's
to like piece
a good
that all
point.
together. Like, why is saying no, you can't participate in this such a bad thing? I cannot play in the NBA. I am glad that they say you can't do that because it would be stupid for me to attempt it. Right?
I guess it's
but
because
I'm good at other things to be able to do what I want to do.
under
right? So
my
why are we
definition
saying-
of anarchy, I feel like me telling someone no would be like
But it's a relationship. It's
state.
not a location.
But that's true, I guess. It's like I just look at that, I guess, would be anti-anarchy. It would be because I'm telling someone else where they can go or what they can do.
But anarchy is a voluntary association, right? So with that, if everybody says, here's the stipulations for what we're going to do, like this, what we're doing right here is an anarchistic relationship, right? Nobody here is, I mean, we talk over each other at times, but we all are giving each other the level of respect to be able to communicate, right? So why would it be if there's someone dominating the conversation, jumping in on everyone while they're trying to talk, we would probably collectivize and say, hey, this person's got to go, right? That exact same thing in your theory could work because you're not telling that person no, you're saying you have to agree by what we have communally accepted upon this area. But again, I go back to my initial premise, the problem is scale.
Yeah, society can be self-organizing, right?
Well, it largely is self-organizing. I think that's the main point. But I do still come back to the idea that, well, at the end of the day, we do need courts. We do need jurisdictions. We need to say, well, we have borders, and we're gonna say who can come and who can go. And there are basic things that are that governments have a purview over. I think where everything goes wrong is when the government grows larger and they start taking purview over other things. And I know a lot of anarchists would probably agree with me on that and then want to go the extra step further. But largely our problem isn't that we're, you know, not close enough to anarchy. Well, I mean, obviously we're not close enough to anarchy. The problem is we've got too much government. It's too intrusive. It's too much in our lives. And then you get all these weird moral frameworks of positive rights versus negative rights, where, you know, rights infringe on one person, and having their rights honored infringes on the rights of another person. And this is a philosophical thing that really confuses a lot of people, but it's essentially what happens when you have large S in government, and it becomes a societal problem at that rate.
I
So
would
do you
support any.
think?
Go ahead.
I was just curious. Like, do you think then, to both Darren and Clyde and anybody else, is like one of the, you know, sort of failings, I guess, for lack of a better word, of Canada is just, you know, who would have, well, I mean, you could have thought, but it's such a large country, and to encapsulate and try and advocate and have rules for that many people in this complex of a system as it's become, just in and of itself, I just don't think is really doable. You know, when I'm hearing Zach talk, it's like smaller systems might just work better because there's better representation of the people and what they value. And I think people will self-exclude. People do want to go towards and be around people that value the same things and live similar lifestyles, right? So I think you'd self-exclude into these states or communities. But I think one of the learnings here in Canada and the United States is that it is really hard in such a complex society to have representation en masse like that over a large landmass and do a good job at it.
I think we have the infrastructure already. We just don't use it. We've spent too much time centralizing power into the federal government, and then Trudeau within his time has centralized it even further into his cabinet. Like this is a direction that we shouldn't be going towards central authority. We should be going back to you know, where the municipality is the most important in your life. It should be that, and then the provincial government.
That's what I mean.
Or your county government, then your provincial government, then the federal government, and the purview of those governments should be seen as such. Your local municipality should be the more dominant sort of thing in your life, and every step outwards towards the federal government should have less involvement in your life. But it's gone exactly the wrong way. It's gone the opposite way.
What if we conscripted everyone? Do you think that would help? It's like jury duty. You get like a per diem and you just get a thing in the mail. And it's like, Teese, you're a senator for 18 months.
No, I'm not.
You don't sound like much of an anarchist. I'm sorry to say. You keep bringing up ideas that are compulsory, mandatory things.
Well, because the state's
you're
not
a great anarchist here. Stop wanting to kill people, Darren. Like, come on, the masses aren't the problem. Like, two pillars of enlightenment.
I don't want to kill people.
Anybody fucks with you, you're all good.
I don't want to kill people. It just it seems like an inevitable consequence of an anarchist system is that you're going to have those same sort of rub ups, and it's going to happen because, like we already said, someone's going to rile up a bunch of people, and they're going to start calling him, you know, whatever they want to call him, whether it's king or chief or champ or bro, and they're going to come over and try and take my shit. I mean, that seems to inevitably happen every time without something. So I've just kind of accepted that if I would give you that one, Clyde, because I do think that going back to anarchy is going to, and I'm fine with it. To put that on, I'm fine with taking this on, and that level of personal responsibility becomes also personal safety, because that's, you're going to run into that. Everybody's not going to be good all the time.
So that's a really important point. I just like how to get where I'm about to describe. It's difficult, but you're describing a system of anarchy with people who are so uneducated that they just resort to barbarism and tribalism, and then they go and invade other people again. Or so hungry. It doesn't have to be uneducated. Oh, yeah, hunger will do it. By whatever means the system collapses or whatever point they reach that place, totally. But what anarchy is supposed to be is very, very well educated people who understand the two pillars of enlightenment, which is basically just self-defense and not going out there and trying to kill people at the same time. So don't violate other people's rights. And if everybody understands that, then we're able to work together. But if you have this barbarian horde, yeah, that's a pretty big problem. And we don't want to go back to that. So the question then becomes, in this age of communication or information or attempting to communicate information or whatever paradigm we exist in, how the hell do we get to a point of educating people about the reality? And I don't know.
And do the 60% want to be educated? Are they even educatable?
Can I attempt to throw in a spiritual aspect, perhaps just a little something, a thought that keeps coming up? I'm okay if the system just collapses and destroys itself. It doesn't really affect me. I don't participate in it. I don't want to participate in it. I kind of have to. I'd rather not. I pay attention to what's going on, but it's clear what's going on. In my mind, maybe I'm wrong, but again, individual freedom is a very pure thing, to do what you want and think how you want to think, and of course not hurt anybody. But this system is a waste of time, in my opinion, for me, and I'm just an individual expressing individual freedom and freedom of speech. And I'm in a very fortunate position where I can detether quite a lot, grow a lot of my own food, have chickens, and live a somewhat idyllic life if the government would really just butt out. So I don't know if that's a spiritual position, but really maybe it is, because I'm not attached really to it at all. Am I? I will be dead someday. Should I be attached? How much should you be attached? How much anger can you drum up for this fucking bullshit in Ottawa? That's why I've cut it out of my life. I don't watch it anymore. This CPAC channel, after the shit with the carbon tax going on yesterday and today, I've officially, my wife, I was like, can we ban it? Should we ban this shit from our house permanently? This whole government apparatus? And yes, that's what's the decision today. So that's all I have to say. That's just something that keeps coming up. Fuck the system. Over.
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting sentiment. I really think that you don't necessarily have to be attached to it. I mean, if you're attached to a geographical location, then yeah, maybe you want to fight for it. If things go sour, which they've gone in previous places in the past. I mean, if you're fair skinned and you're in Canada, it's probably because someone in your lineage was fed up with the way things were somewhere else, and you ended up here, right? And that's the thing. Places, you know, political systems come and go. They can be successful, and then they can turn into failures. They can be failures out from the outset, and then, you know, collapse from therein. You know, people still live in the Soviet states. Like, they've lived through it. It happens. Like, you don't have to be involved. You may go through hard times if you want to stay in a geographical location. If it gets bad, you might want to pack up and find some other new place, learn a new language. These are things that are options for people. I mean, I'm of the mindset that I do like the ideas of liberty and self-governance. So I'm going to try to fight for what we have, as long as it looks like this is something that we could regain. As soon as it seems to be a futile endeavor, either, you know, pack up and go, or what, you know, make decision from there.
What would that look like? Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, what about free market representation, where we don't actually have territorial representation, where we have a geographic area, but every vote matters then at that point. And this is a good demonstration on this particular stream. We got all these personalities here. We're all very different, but we attract different people to follow us. And if we had a representation system where every vote mattered, so, and it wasn't geographically based, because right now, if you get 51%, that means 49% are represented, but the 51% are. But if there was a way to have a free market leadership where people like Clyde and myself and others can grow a following, grow a bigger following, and eventually reach a critical mass point where we can do representation for that, it wouldn't matter where in Canada you are. You would be represented by Clyde or Jason or Darren or whatever, because you relate to them. And if there was like a voucher system where my vote to Darren mattered, and then Darren would have a way to not just represent me, but, you know, on a taxation level too, that's where I'm choosing to put my money or my voucher. It would give us all a chance to have some sort of representation. And then in a league-like level, or like a Senate or actually a true House of Commons, this is where these leaders can come together to work out issues. And Clyde, this could be built in tandem with the current system of policing and courts and stuff like that, because we still need those services. But we're talking about the government portion of it, the governing portion of it, going from a territorial best, you're selecting the best of the two evils, the better of the two evils, versus finding one that you actually like, regardless of where they are, and then putting your vote or your proxy vote behind them, plus $1 or whatever from the taxation side of things, because that would create a free market, and leaders would come and go based on their abilities. And if they're a good leader, you're going to continue to follow. Just like on social media, if you go and put a bad post out there, you're going to lose some followers, and if you do a good post, you're going to gain some followers. And if people were able to pick in a free market type of way of representation, everybody would then be able to find somebody that they can get behind to have the representation of. And I think part of the challenge is leaders today are not really leaders what the word means, because lead means you're in the front of the line and you have people following you. We use the word leader like a dictator, really, where they tell you what to do. I think we had a variety of types of leaders like we have on the stream right now. Everybody could find somebody that they like or become that somebody, that leader itself, because it's a free market. And once you reach a certain number of followers, then you become part of the Senate or become part of the House of Commons, where you can collaborate in like a league type of way to do the big issues. But at least everybody.
The Kardashians would end up leading the country. That's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea. It's completely insane. We don't want to go to something.
We don't have to go down that route again. Do you have a better solution?
Jason, are you suggesting a competency hierarchy? Is that what you're trying to get?
I'm trying to find a republic that isn't geographically based, so that everybody can find somebody to represent them.
Well, could I propose this, Jason? Would you think that we maybe moved on past the idea of having somebody represent us? Like, we all have a supercomputer in our pocket, and I wonder, we have this idea of representation that came from a time when we're in small rural places and you couldn't give up people because everybody had to be hard at work, so you'd send somebody off to represent you, and then they'd have to come back and look in your eye. And I do like the idea of the people representing us having to look at us every day. But then I wonder if we've moved past that. Like, it's clear that the people that are representing us aren't reading the bills before they sign them on our behalf. They're not representing us. They're representing and voting for a party. And it's like, could we do any worse by just voting ourselves through the supercomputer in our pocket? And I wonder, I'm not challenging you. I'm just wanting to have some sort of conversation about it, because I can hear what you're saying about getting out of that idea of just selecting from the 2 or 3 people that are in your community and moving past that into a bigger geographic place. But then I wonder, is that even old school? Are we not past the representation? Nobody has to go to Ottawa, right? Nobody has to assign somebody who's smarter than them because they can't read, because those people aren't reading the bill anyway, So I wonder if that's something you would entertain in the future, is just getting past even that and representing ourselves.
Yeah, we have to change what representation means, because representation means you adopt my beliefs and then I take my beliefs forward. Or does representation mean I listen to you and bring your ideas forward in a communal type of way? And I think that's where the trouble is, because we're looking for leaders that we like and leaders that have our ideas, so they can represent us based on their beliefs and ideas, when a representative really should be listening to the people that are supporting them, the ones that are behind them. And look, this whole thing about Kardashian, I don't have a problem with that. If that is where people wanted to put their representation and actually speak to them, then that's fine. If Kardashian ends up running the world because 10 million people went behind him, that's fine. But what I'm trying to get at here is, I think we have some misdefinition of the words. Leader doesn't mean leader anymore. Leader is somebody that was at the front of the pack, and the people were behind him, and they would lead the way, clear the trees, clear the path. Now it's a dictator, really, but we still call them a leader. And then the representation, when representation currently means whatever that person believes, because they only listen to the voters once every 4 years. Instead of doing once every 4 years, like you have that powerful computer, you could do things like Reddit. You know, you vote up things and ideas, and then you see it bubbles up. And like, okay, well, the people that follow me really want me to bring forward anti-Soji stuff. So this is what I'm going to bring. And then I can report back to them saying, here's what I've done when I went to the House of Commons, because we're really the House of Commons now. And I fought for you, and here's where we're coming back. And it needs to be a two-way road. And I really think we can use technology for that too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, can't Clyde, I mean, if Clyde and Sheldon really think that the system can be fixed and they can take it to the next level, I mean, maybe they need to use some of those ideas about using technology and combine it within the system. I mean, maybe that's the only way that it can survive, is to use some direct representation somehow.
Yeah,
So
'cause I'd like to-
How are we not doing
I'm pretty
that, though?
interested in this idea.
Because they
and,
don't represent what we want. Nobody gets what we want in the country right
They
now.
don't even talk to their
not working.
constituents. I mean, it's actually disgusting. So, and you do have to transition to something. As much as I
I
want
don't
to
have big
do,
enough boobs.
as much as I want to say anarchy, like Clyde called me on, is because I don't think we can just transition into that now. Not without a fundamental upsetting of the apple cart. Because if we just decide tomorrow, the resources are distributed in an uneven fashion right now. To just switch that thing on right now, these
every
giant,
revolutionary has said
all the
exact same thing.
corporations are just going to
We have
take the power.
you have
So
to tear it all down.
yeah, you have to if in my opinion anyway, and maybe one of the other anarchists in the room have another idea on it, but you can't just switch to that now. It's like I went from libertarianism to anarchy just because I don't trust the corporations. And I think that's what will replace the government in a libertarian system without any sort of regulation. Not that I really agree with regulation, but I don't trust the corporations. So I feel like in order to make that transition, there needs to be some sort of, not the great reset, but we need to start from the same starting line. We can't have Lockheed Martin and this and that and all these sorts of people already running around with monopolies, with state sponsored monopolies, and now they're just in the same position but with no boundaries.
You don't need to you don't need anarchy to question the legal framework of the legal corporation. I mean, they always weren't around. This is a way of skirting liability for groups of people as they put things together. When corporations were first formed, they were or like the framework was the first legal framework. They dissolved after X amount of time. They weren't permanent agencies. So I mean, we could get and this is all long discussions that we could get into. This isn't what I'm trying to go the road I'm trying to go down. I want to understand what Jason was saying, and hopefully I'm understanding you correct. Now, I always look at the free market as the best democratization of goods and service of everything basically around you. And the reason why it's the best democratization of everything is because only the people who have a stake in something actually get to have a vote on it. It's anyone who's wants to buy that product or service can say, I like this product or service, or I'd like to have it a different way, or what have you. If you don't buy it, you're ultimately giving a vote of no confidence to that product. Every product that you don't buy today is you saying, I gave no confidence to that product today. Now, what's interesting is with this new with the internet and with drop shipping and the way things have been going, it has been getting away from brick and mortar and the idea that you have to go to a physical location or geographical locations around you in order to get these things, because the entrepreneurs would be around you. Now it's online. There are communities, different ways that you can get these products or services. You don't have to stay within geographical locations. In fact, some services, the only reason why you have to stay in the geographical location is because your government tells you can't shop outside that geographical. I don't know why you can't buy insurance in Alberta, for example, if you're in British Columbia. This is a framework that the government's put together that I think we should get rid of. We should even be able to buy from American insurance companies, companies anywhere in Europe, as long as there's a legal framework to actually make sure that they pay out if they these contracts are upheld. Now, it's an interesting concept. I'll have to stew over this, but am I getting you right? Am I going down the right vein with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think a free market, the best will bubble up, the bad will fall away. You have to produce every single day. You're going to have to be fighting for that support every single day, because as soon as you mess up or do something really wrong, you'll lose it quickly. So just like in a free market, if there's a boycott on something, boom, this is down. And it's also a signal to, the person doing the representation. Hey, I need to clean this up. I need to do a better job. I need to listen better, or else I lose all the support, and then I can't even be a representative. Because right now we've chopped up Canada 338 ridings of about 100,000 people. But Clyde, you have over 100,000 followers, so you already have a bigger impact on the number of people than a single MP would have. And if you turn to your audience and you said, hey, live healthy, work hard, do these kind of things, and they adopt your values and they learn from you, you already have a bigger impact than any MP has in Canada right now. And I think we're kind of at that stage where we really don't need these physical barriers anymore of the boundaries or geographical regions or ridings. We really should be able to go across Canada, and a whole bunch of people coast to coast can support Clyde or Graham or Sheldon, because I guarantee you there's well over 100,000 people that have similar views as Sheldon. So Sheldon would be able to become a representative, and that's how I can kind of see this working. 338 representatives that have support from across Canada, as long as you reach like the 100,000 level. I think that would be a great way to look at this. We don't even have to tear down the whole system. We're just basically tearing down the riding boundaries, but the rest of the system, we can work within it. I think we might be at that stage in the modernization of Canada.
It's an interesting theory, and I'd like to stew over it.
Like, can somebody support more than one person?
That's a great question. Great question. And that's something that we could debate, because sure, right off the top, just like we do on social media, yeah, you can follow many people. But when it comes down to, I think, the financial portion of it, I think it's like a voucher system. If I want to go to a particular school, I don't have to go to the one near me. I can go to any school if there's a voucher system. So when it comes to being able to pay or the financial portion of it, you'll pick one. But you're welcome to follow the ideology or ideas of someone. I think you have multiple people that you follow. But when it comes down to where you put your vote, but when you put your vote, it goes to one, because that's the monetary portion of it. Because right now, I'm not sure if you guys know, but after the election's done, it's basically $1 per vote that the party gets. So if a party gets 5 million votes, they get $5 million. That already happens today. Now, $1 wouldn't be the metric; it'd be a lot more than that. But you get the idea. Where do you put? And by the way, I think you should be able to switch it without election. So you could almost get rid of election, because what you're really doing is, if you stop liking Jason Levine and you start liking Clyde, all of a sudden Jason's support goes down to below the limit to be a representative, but Clyde's goes up. You really wouldn't even have to have elections. We could have, because it's a free market, it would be coming in and out of leaders all the time based on their abilities. And if you really dislike somebody like Justin, even the people that were behind him would pull back. And this could be a good way to redo this. We don't even need elections if we had a system like that.
What electronic system is not corruptible?
Not a bad question. Oh, absolutely not a bad question. But open source thing, blockchain things, there's some stuff that we can start working on if we really had a desire for that. But I don't think that should be the barrier that stops it, because every system could be corrupted, of course. But we could certainly work in a technocratic type of way where open source and stuff like that could work. And because there isn't a single leader and there isn't a single party or anybody single control of that, I think there's an opportunity there to kind of hash this out a little bit more.
But Jason, like insofar as like this evolution of the social strata that you're describing, I think it's actually a really beautiful concept. And it is the idea that we should be able to evolve to a more malleable and representative form of what people actually care for. There are two basic problems on either end of that. One is kind of like, what happens to the people who don't consent to that system? Are they kind of rounded up and put into camps? Are they forced?
They follow, no, they don't have to at all. They would follow the leader who doesn't consent. And so you would actually have people that would resist and oppose the actual system. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, so that's an interesting idea.
The Sheldons of the world, right?
Totally. So it would allow certain people who basically are saying that's still government, no, and we're going to go and we're not going to be participating in that. So that would be sort of a removal from. So that's what's great, and I can appreciate that. On the other side of the spectrum, what we're facing on a global stage right now is like the WHO is basically overriding nation states with the pandemic, kind of like scare tactics that was instigated in order to become the continuum that we exist in, so that they could have that global coup d'etat. And that is a concerted agenda that has been long built and meticulously executed. So there is a rings within rings infrastructure of the Anglo-American establishment, conjoined with a variety of other oligarchic interests on the global stage that are going to come for people who don't play their game. So in the way in which you're describing a well-intentioned effervescence and evolution of the human spirit, and I really love that you have the answer that some people can basically just say, no, we're going to do that system. All of us are simultaneously being targeted by this globalist, parasitic, intragenerational, intranational psychopath criminal cabal that runs
down to the local,
sorry to
down to the
interrupt you
local
here,
level sometimes, down to the local level sometimes.
So I think what you're saying, Teese, is that Jason's idea is to bring it in closer to the individual. Well, where your idea, or where what's currently happening is we're extending it out so that people have less involvement. So, where we have an actual vote right now inside of Canada, they're trying to take that away from us. So our idea right now is closer to Jason's system. Their idea right now is closer to the WHO's system. Is that what you're saying?
I'm kind of, it's like, kind of, I guess it's one of those things where you have to allow people to choose the system that works for them without infringing upon other people's rights. It gets really complicated, so that'd be a long conversation. What I'm saying is that I like the way he describes it in a social build, but we're also at war. And that's difficult for us to remember because we're being gaslit about that war. And it's multiple overlapping slow motion genocides that will reveal themselves over the course of the next 10 to 20 years.
There are wins. There are definitely
Exactly.
wins there. Brexit was largely over this stuff. It was an unelected bureaucracy in Brussels that was calling the shots on what was happening in England. And people were like, forget that. No, look at all these regulations that are coming in that make no sense for us from this central authority. Forget it. We want out. And Brexit was largely won over that. People like the idea of making decisions for themselves. This whole manifest destiny thing. Largely, people are asleep and they're not paying attention as these bureaucrats are trying to usurp more and more power into a central authority. I think as soon as people get the gist of what's actually going down, you're going to see more and more movements moving away from central authority. Like I said, popularity of libertarian ideals is growing. It's growing in Canada. It's growing in the United States. It's growing in South America. We're seeing it happen, and I'm optimistic about it.
Yeah.
Well, Clyde, do you have information? Like, I like what you said there about people who do like to have decision making over their lives. And so, when I was talking earlier about us having a supercomputer in our pocket and being able to vote on every little thing, not every little thing, but you know what I mean, represent ourselves. I'm just wondering if you know any numbers on, when it's a direct referendum where we get to vote on an actual issue and have our input. Versus when we vote for representatives, do you have any numbers on percentages that will show up to vote for a direct issue versus how the percentage of people that will vote for a representative? Does that make sense?
I do understand what you're saying and what you're asking. I don't have any direct numbers for that. I know in the United States, when they have, say, I think it's the gubernatorial races, they'll also have propositions. So propositions will come up.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Americans get annoyed with it because they're like, well, I don't have to choose about all these different things.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how actually things go in directions where the political environment doesn't go in that direction, or the representatives wouldn't have gone in that direction. So say a good case in point for this one is actually back in, it must have been over a decade now ago in California. They were trying to legalize gay marriage in California state. And of course, all of the representatives across the state wanted it, but they had a referendum on it instead. Instead, they put it to the people to make the choice, and they chose not to allow gay marriage in California of all places. And the reason why was that there was key demographics in certain areas, like there was black areas, black neighborhoods, and those places, very Christian background. They're like, no way. Hispanic neighborhoods, a bunch of reasons why it didn't go the way they wanted with representative democracy. So what you find is things go in different ways. What I say is, like, also on top of that, if you just look at the free market and how products are bought and sold, when you make a choice on these things, you're making direct, this is direct democracy on the products and services that'll come to your supermarket, for example. If you're the only one buying rutabagas, then the grocery store is probably going to stop stocking rutabagas, right? Because they won't be able to sell it. This is direct democracy. And I think there could be a way of putting this forward without making it a cumbersome annoyance for voters, and in a way that people can come in and give their point of view, and only on the items that they have really a stake in as well. We haven't come up with that. Jason's got some interesting ideas. We could probably explore that. It probably needs a lot of tweaking, but we're living in a different age, so we could probably bring.
I just think it's interesting that people want that direct say, and I think as we do get more ability to put in, we become less enchanted, I guess I would say, with the people who supposedly represent us, especially when you have things like this carbon tax, where it's like, well, are you gonna vote for your representation, your the people you represent, your constituents, or are you gonna vote with the party? Well, we told you you're gonna vote for the party, and it's like, well, I think that's lost a lot of luster for people, and so I was just curious about, if you were to put something in where people could represent themselves, at least on the big issues, you know what I mean? Like, not infrastructure things and what have you, but I wonder if even just having a system where the three big issues are always on the ballot for people to represent themselves, and like a combination of self-representation and then, representative for things that are not the make or break issues. But I do like what you guys are saying. I like the imagination behind it.
Yeah, and there can be a transition. The transition can be getting behind independent candidates and getting rid of parties on a regional level, on a riding level, by being a modern candidate and being a modern representative, which is you're using technology to actually listen to the people and talk with the people and genuinely do it.
I guess the one thing though that's kind of
sorry, go ahead, Limina. No,
I was just gonna say.
Go.
You go. Okay.
No. Sorry, I was honestly, I was trying to afford you the floor. All yours.
Cool. I was just wondering too, though, when we're talking about, there was a lot of talk of revolution and tear it down and stuff. I just wonder, and Darren had alluded to it earlier, is like, tear it down might not be the right word. It's possibly crumbling. Whether people tear it down or not, there just might not be anything left to rebuild as well. So I wonder if you can run like.
It is crumbling. No, it is crumbling. I
say
tear it down metaphorically. I'm not really interested in tearing it down. I think it's crumbling. I mean, I think, the thing I always go back to is that Ayn Rand nailed it. I mean, if you haven't read Atlas Shrugged, read it now, because that's the future that I see us sort of slipping into. And I mean, we might disagree on the powers at the top and stuff like that, but anyway you slice it, I don't see how we can pull up out of the just sort of. So I do like pretty high level, and actually I'd be interested to hear what Clyde has to say in his sector on this, because I don't know where everyone else around the room fits in on their day job, or if they have a day job, or what they're doing. But I still do have a day job, and I do high level construction. So, I'm in like high rises, hospitals, airports, big jobs. And the amount of, I would say, how far the industry has fallen in only 5 years. If you would have told me that was impossible 10 years ago, I probably would have said it wasn't. And it's like on a multitude of things. There's no labor, for one thing. There's no competent labor, at least. There seems to be a missing sector where we went from old dudes who retired and to young dudes, and there was a bunch of missing ages in between to help pass down this knowledge. And I'm sort of noticing that in, welding, electrician, plumbing, sort of all of the construction sectors when I go in And it's not even just the construction level, it's the engineering level, the consulting level, the architectural level. We'll go in and sit in these high level meetings, and it's like the shit that comes out of some of these people's mouths is kind of astounding to me. And we're to the point that I'm even doing things on job sites that when I started doing what I do would have been considered, you just don't do it. You just, that's a construction no. But now it's sort of the type of thing that engineers and architects and the people running the jobs are telling us to do on a semi-regular basis, and it seems to be accelerating. I'm wondering if you're seeing that in the mechanic sector, because personally here in Calgary, I cannot find a mechanic that can fix my truck right now, and I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, we're starving. We're starving for people, and they're not coming. They're not coming out of the schools. That's it. I mean, there's just not enough people interested in the job, which means there's a lot of us that are, we're getting lucrative positions. You can basically pick the shop that you work at. No problem. Everybody's hurting for more mechanics. It's a large. I mean, I blame the education.
Have you
that a
tried
lot of people
hiring transgender mechanics?
They don't want the jobs. They're not coming. They're not coming to pull wrenches. That's for sure. No, that's not a thing. So largely the problem is kids, they were taught, get into IT, get into these fields, get into this or that, and they largely ignored the trades. When I was a kid, I had a teacher that said, get into the trades. Like, nobody's saying get in the trades. There's going to be a huge thirst for people in the trades, whatever it is, tool and die, mechanics, plumbers, everything. Get into it. You'll never, ever run out of work. It's recession proof. And it's true. It's true. There's no time I'll ever not have a job unless I don't want a job. And I still want my job. I still like my job. I keep my day job for sure.
Are you seeing people promoted?
This relates to the war on humanity. People have lost the ability to even pick up a tool or have the desire to break a sweat. Or, I mean, I'm speaking very broadly, obviously. It's not true everywhere. But the war on humanity is what comes to my mind from talking about mechanics, not being able to find more mechanics. But I'm onto something. I mean, I come out of the food industry, and it's a shambles. Don't put anything in your mouth. Do not go to a restaurant. Do not do it. Get some fresh stuff, man. Anyway, these thoughts came to mind. I'll hand it over.
Yeah,
Clyde, I just went to a career fair that you might be interested in with my niece. I'm in Red Deer here, and Red Deer College has downgraded, although I think it's great. They're now a polytechnic, so they were having a career day, and there was a lot of linesmen there and a lot of electrical. My husband's a dual ticket journeyman, so I'm like very supportive of the trades. I think it's a great idea, and I was trying to get my niece in there. And lots of trades jobs. It was really interesting. And then they had speakers, and the speakers were for imagine.org, I think it is. You should look them up. They're great. So this college run by, they're the DIE specialist, where it was so poorly laid out. There was 40 Red Deer Polytechnic workers there, probably more putting it together than actually career people who showed up. And the most important guest speaker they had from this Imagine was all about how to provide psychological safety in your workplace, which means there's no more room for your power. There's no room for timeline. And we should imagine a world where you can go to work and you can say anything you want without the risk of a negative consequence. That was the whole platform. And it was so incongruent. The speakers and the actual workers at the college/tech polytechnic, I was saying to some of the booths, do you think this is super out of line and incongruent? Like, people are supposed to go to work to actually do a job, not having a healing circle, right? And the workers couldn't imagine it, and the career guys said that it was so poorly put together that they forgot to tell the trades wing and announce it to the people in the trades that they were there for the high schools. But God damn it. Oh, sorry, Graham. I told my friend Troy I wouldn't swear, but gosh darn it, they sure had the imagined people there that were creating safety and DIE, stuff and psychological safety in the workplace. And by the way, you don't really have to do your job anymore. It was unreal. I thought I was in bizarro land.
I gotta find out when that's happening in Vancouver. I want to go interview them. That's amazing. It's fantastic because it's so out to lunch. Like here's the reality. It's a good thing that people who fall in the DEI camp, they do particular things. They like to do things with their hair. They have particular tattoos that they like to get. They have particular piercings they like to put on their faces, and they put their pronouns on their resumes. And it's the perfect defense from lawsuit. You get one of those resumes. The first thing you do, you say, thank you very much. You might give you a call later on, and it goes right in the shredder. I mean, this is the reality of the situation. And but these people are putting themselves into that situation by buying into this DEI crap. Nobody wants it. And it's a lawsuit waiting to happen.
Yeah, but they're actually getting good at masking it. So they show up normal. They don't put the pronouns on the resumes. They go in, with actual qualifications, their sleeves rolled down, their hair at their own natural color. And then when they get hired, they show up for their first day of work in full garb. And this does happen a lot more than you'd like to think, Clyde.
You still got to do 90 days.
Yeah, that's right. I'm in Alberta. I could just fire someone for no reason.
Fine, but if you've gotten hired to that point, somebody still has to come up with an idea or a reason to fire you. And I mean, you can put on somebody's termination that, fired for no specific reason, which I get. But the human rights boards inside of Canada, if you find somebody that's Indigenous, Aboriginal, call them what you want. If there's somebody that's darker skin that shows up with purple hair, a bone in their nose, it's not as easy as you think, because you still have those 90 days is what you think as an employer. You don't. They make it into their first day of work. They show up day 2 and they're dressed in full garb. You're on the hook now. And it's going to favor a lot better for their human rights than it is for your actual paying business. And I can promise you that, because I've seen it 1,000 times.
Yeah, there's safety compliances that you do have to you do have to comply with.
Safety, yes.
Yeah.
But I mean we're talking trades there.
Mm-hmm.
How many other positions inside of Canada, inside of Alberta, inside of British Columbia that are not trades? Now, one of the big things is and I know specifically inside of the province of Alberta, is if you want to go to a trade school, and they've changed a lot of the legislation around where they've taken a lot of non-specific trades and actually created trades out of them. So then you have to go through a trades program. The only problem is inside of the province, the programs don't exist. There's no red seals if you want to install siding. But at the same time, if there's an inspector that goes by, you have to have some sort of provisional information that shows you're competent to be in that position. Now, in the industry that I was in, people were mandated to be on rooftops. Well, on rooftops, there's certain safety that you have to kind of go along with, protocols. And then there's a certain amount of competence that you have to go along with. The problem with that is inside of the entire province, there's 8 inspectors. So they've set out regulations, they've changed legislation, but they have nobody that's actually got the ability to monitor that. So they've created 52 new trades or along those lines with nobody, 8 people for the entire province that has to know the individualistics of each individual trade, the safety requirements, the specificities of competency inside of these jobs. The amount of bureaucracy that has to go into something like that is incredible. Now, let's flip to the other side when it comes down to the actual individual education of these people. The province is sponsoring people into SATE and NATE programs. So Southern Institute of, in the trade schools. So there's one in Edmonton, it's NATE. There's one in Calgary, it's SATE. Now, if you're just a regular person, a straight white guy that wants to go to a trade school, there's, let's call it $5,000 that the province will sponsor you into those programs. If you state that you're transgender or that your gender is different, that number automatically doubles.
Yep.
So it's
Yet
doing
no,
nothing.
still nobody's going in.
It's doing nothing. Well, no,
it's not changing anything.
and that's it. But at the same token, I mean, what was it, like 10 years ago when women were given better insurance rates than men were? So all men would have to do is go into the Department of Motor Vehicles or, into their local registries and identify as a woman, have that put on their license, and they were actually saving money on insurance.
Damn, I couldn't do that when I was getting my insurance. That would have been
Yeah,
great.
that's fucking crazy.
I think you still pay more if you're a young dude. And I mean, you probably should, because young dudes are fucking retarded. That's the, you got to watch out for them.
No, but at the same token, how many people are going into trades and then somebody says to them, listen, I'll cut you the difference. I'm getting an extra $5,000. I'll give you $2,500. Just tell me you're a chick. And they'll be like,
and then their numbers go up, and then they've fulfilled their quota.
It's the con on the system. They're supporting irrationality. They're supporting mental disorders where there's no business in doing that. It doesn't value anybody. If somebody came to shovel your sidewalks and they were a boy or they were a girl, or if they were a boy that identified it as a girl or a girl that identified it as a boy,
I'd pay the boy more.
Give a shit as long as your sidewalks clean at the end of the day.
I'd pay the boy more. He's going to be faster.
Is that we're not focusing on meritocracy, we're focusing on lunacy, and that's where we've headed as a culture, and that's where we have to stop. That's where we have to sit down as a culture and sit down and say, listen, this is what's founded this country. We've been based on traditional family values, and some of those values have come from Christianity, which some people don't believe in, and that's fine. But if you don't understand perspective, if you don't understand what's good, you don't understand what's bad. If you don't understand what's right, you don't understand what's wrong. You don't understand what's up, you don't understand what's down. So we've lost perspective, and we've clouded it with incompetency. And that's the problem that we're facing right now. And that we're not facing that problem in the trades. We're not facing that problem in the professionals, because we're doing the same thing. We're lowering grade standards inside of certain groups, certain sects, to allow them in. Let me ask you all a question. You're wrongly accused of a crime. Do you want somebody that has a different color skin from you, or a different color hair, or a great big fat ass because they got 80%? Or do you want somebody that's got 100% and they look the same as you do? Do you want an 80% doctor? Do you want a 100% doctor? Because that's where we're moving into. That's where we're transitioning into. And that's a really troubling thing, is because we're moving our trusts. We're being told that we have to move our trusts, not based on meritocracy, but based on inclusion. And that's a bad place to be.
The problem with this, though, is that sometimes you get in the one with the blue hair and they are 100%, and you don't know that. And it creates stereotypes that ought not be there, as well as diminishing the actual meritocracy. But you get a stereotype.
You're 1,000% right.
Yeah.
You're
So this
right.
is something that came out of affirmative action in the United States. So a lot of people started assuming, if they saw a black doctor, this person's not as skilled, but it's not actually accurate. Like maybe they lowered the barrier to entry into the schools, but every doctor that passes in, I believe it's like a 90 percentile. They don't have the the leniency that the trades have of like passing with a 70% grade. And I know some people pass with the 70% grade and they get in, they're red seals just like me, you know, and I had a 98% average in school. But I mean, that's the thing. It created a false stereotype that didn't actually exist. The people who were apt and passed, got their doctorate and went into medicine, they all had a very high standard. And but it became a trope in society that, oh, you know, if you see a doctor who's got different colored skin, oh, maybe they didn't get a good grade or something like that. It's actually not actually accurate.
One of the states just announced recently that you don't have to pass the bar in order to be a lawyer. Like this was like 3 days ago on social media. And I've seen this. You don't even have to pass the bar. So I can call myself a lawyer in one of the states. I don't have to pass the bar. I can just put lawyer, Sheldon Yakachuk. I'm a lawyer. I can hand out my cards and legally represent somebody because I don't have to pass the bar in order to meet that criteria. Conversely,
I think I'm okay with that as long as you do a good job. I mean, whoever can argue the best, I don't care if they got the bar.
No,
I mean, if they're flying the plane, I care. But if they're just arguing, I think I'd be just go with the best arguer.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you're only going to know that hindsight. You're only going to know a doctor that's giving you the right prescriptions, that's giving you the right medical advice. If you survive, if you're dead, how many complaints are you going to give to that, Darren?
Well, at least 3,
Exactly.
1 for each of my kids, and probably the wife.
You're dead or you're in jail. You got nothing, man.
And not to burst your bubble, Darren. I got to run, folks, but not to burst your bubble, Darren. 51% is a passing grade for pilot. I'm a pilot. I know that. So unfortunately, it's a lot lower than you think. Graham, thank you very much for having me here. I think we should just a lot more because this demonstrated exactly what we were talking about. A way to have a communication and have some discord. I do have to run because I identify as an early morning host.
Tell us, give us
51%.
Your plug your stuff.
Yeah, where can people find your stuff?
Hey, Jason, just before you leave, man, great pleasure meeting you. How awesome time being on a call with you. Really appreciate you taking some time with us.
Absolutely, Sheldon. Let's do it again. It would be a great thing to do every couple of weeks or so. You can find me at thelevingshow.com, and you get on my socials from there as well. And Lima, I have to go to the court tomorrow for Lethbridge. I'm covering the Coots matter there. So I'll go be...
I was just down there for the 2nd year anniversary, and we did the drive by the jail and
the slow roll.
And drove by the ditch we lived in for 2 weeks and stuff. But I also wanted to say it's been great being on with you, and I really appreciate the work you've done, especially around the Coots Milk River blockades.
Well, thank you very much. But I'll go see Chris Carbert and Tony Olenek tomorrow morning, 9:30, Lethbridge Court. If you can be there, be there. But thank you all very much. I do have to get some rest so I can be nice and sharp tomorrow. It was my pleasure to meet so many new faces and see some familiar ones. So thank you, Graham, for inviting me, and I would love to come back again.
All the best, dude.
That's great. See ya. Bye.
And then that's also my cue. I gotta run because I'm also an early morning riser. I make my videos early in the morning.
Where can we find all your stuff? And thanks for coming.
Absolutely, Graham. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the conversation, everybody. This was great. I love expressing new ideas and maybe button heads a little bit. I came in the middle of an argument, so I don't know where that went. Anyway, awesome to see everybody. You can find me over at Clyde Do Something on YouTube. Clyde Do Something on Instagram, Twitter. Those are the secondary platforms. Usually on YouTube, videos every morning, every evening, and a live stream every Friday night. So catch me live tomorrow at 9:30 Eastern, and that would be 6:30 Pacific. That's my time zone. It's that late because I work every day. I do videos in the morning, work a shift, come home, make videos, and then be a dad. So that's my routine. Pleasure to meet you all.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.
See you again, man.
Cheers.
Thanks, Clyde. I like your stuff.
Cheers.
On that note, we might as well start wrapping this thing up. Anyway, we got a good almost 3 hours here. We had
almost midnight in Halifax.
That's right. We had some fights. We had some agreements. We had all in all a good one for the first one. I mean, maybe Canadians aren't as polite as people let on. But let's go around and tell everyone where they can find.
don't judge all Canadians by me, man.
Yeah, well,
I'm
I
the
get caught.
exception.
I get in trouble all the time too because I
Well, we're in the same province. You're in Calgary?
no, I'm in Wheatland County, baby.
Okay, you're stone's throw away. You're
I'm
not here.
surrounded by pastures, trees, and horses. So
Yeah, I'm all country Alberta.
where are
So
you?
I'm in Calgary right now, but I've traveled the province. I represented the province for a number of different companies and in a service industry, so I get around.
I do tend to come to Calgary almost every day. I can't seem to get it. Can't get it out of my system. I still
When you
work
guys
there.
create your own country, what's going to happen to the Atlantic provinces, man? My wife's like, could you please ask these guys if they're going to separate from Canada and create this new Alberta country? What the fuck's going to happen to us?
I just want the
We're gonna
government.
take you over, absorb your land, and live in your space because
Oh,
Atlantic
no.
Canada is fucking beautiful.
If the government
is.
ever gives the land, the reserve land to the Indians, that might be where I head. I might go back to the reserve, but right now you can't own shit there. So it's just, you're just living in Trudeau's fucking backyard. You're literally, you can't own it. It's owned by the crown.
Nova Scotia's a dystopia.
So let's start.
Oh.
Graham, why don't you take us through and wrap everyone up, since you did a great job of bringing everyone in. We'll let you have the honors of
sure.
taking everyone out.
Sure. Well, I want to end it with a quote from a book that we did on audio called The Behavior of Crowds, a psychological study from 1920, because it kind of builds on what Limina and Tiana were saying about the crowds. This is going back over 100 years. They knew about the psychology of crowds. As a practical problem, the habit of crowd making is daily becoming a more serious menace to civilization. Events are making it more and more clear that pressing as certain economic questions, the forces which threaten society are really psychological. So that's just going back to, what they knew way back then in the early 1900s. So anyways, yeah, let's just, thanks for joining us. It was great to meet everybody that I haven't met and see everybody that I know already. So let's just go around. We'll start with Zach and tell us your where we can find your stuff.
Yeah, Schmidt House podcast on Rumble. I do a weekly show on Tuesday evenings at I guess we're mountain time right now, 8:15 on Mountain. It's always so confusing. Saskatchewan doesn't change their clocks, so we're always going back and forth. And right now, it's like really throwing a lot of people through the loop for booking. But yeah, so you can find me on Rumble. I'm on Twitter at Schmidt_Zach, and then Schmidt House Productions on Instagram. I would honestly, I just wanted, this was such a good conversation. I love the format. I think that I've been actually kind of like hoping that someone kind of jumped on this, because there's a couple of like YouTubers and stuff like that down in the States that do this, where it's just a bunch of people, and it can kind of get a bit of a clusterfuck sometimes, but for the most part, you do flesh out some good ideas that way. So really like that. Definitely come back for another one sometime. But I would really just leave the people with the message of tribe and train, because I think that that's the one thing that we're really going to be able to leverage in the future. The collapse, I think, is coming. It's what can we do to be able to prepare ourselves for when it comes, not if.
Thanks. Tease?
Yeah, sure. So again, I'm in Canada. I'm also American, and the stuff that I do tends to focus more on once again, the international, intergenerational criminal syndicates that are using governments as the leverage mechanism in order to rape and pillage their civilian populations. And it's so much worse than most people realize. And it takes a long time to come to terms with how bad it actually is. And people go kicking and screaming towards that realization, clinging to the dead vestiges of deliberately broken systems designed to cage and enslave us. And so I've created a very simple educational outreach tool called Conspiracy Synergy. You can go to conspiracysynergy.com, and it's really fun, engaging. Like, I have rabbit puppets and cartoons and all kinds of stuff like that running around so that you can show it to anyone. You'd be able to show it to like a 13-year-old and they'd enjoy it. I swear in it. But other than that, it's all good. And that's an educational resource that links to dozens, if not hundreds, of different content creators. I've listed some of the best. Graham and Grimerica is included on that list. So if you want to just like right now go figure out like, hey, who else is out there? Get like a whole bunch of names. You can go to the references on conspiracysynergy.com, start looking at like hundreds of different books, tens of thousands of hours of research, and it's a wonderful outreach tool. In addition to that, I co-host a show called AM Wake Up. Graham's also and Darren, I don't know if Darren's ever been a guest on there, but you have. So AM Wake Up, it's a wonderful communal environment for people to come together and have long form conversations about the kind of thing that we've been talking here today. So that's AM Wake Up, and you can get that on Rockfin or Rumble, and those are the two different places to find it.
Awesome. Thanks. How about you, Sheldon?
Yeah, I'm just Yakstack on Google. You'll find me on my my Substack or on my Twitter feed. It's just YA2Ks and an STACK. And I'm more so looking at again, internalizing and fixing the system. Why rebuild something when you can take what's already existing and make it work for you? I'm looking at supporting the local voices, elevating the voices, and the people that have given me a platform, the people that have supported me throughout this, is looking to share their message through the platform they've afforded me. Simple.
Awesome. Thanks. Limina?
Well, thanks for having me again, Darren and Graham. I don't have all the fancy places to find me. My focus really is working one-on-one with people in a resiliency model. So if people are interested in that, they can get a hold of me through my email at liminalresilience@proton.me. I do have a small Rumble channel that I put up things. I'm going to be having Graham on my channel, and we're going to be talking more about moving out of the mental illness, trauma-based paradigm and into a resilience, personal stability. What you could do, everyday tools, and that'll be Monday on my channel, the Human Responsibilities Tribunal on Rumble at 2. And I did want to thank everybody for being here. Sheldon, I'm up in Red Deer, but I also have a place in the southwestern part of Saskatchewan. For anybody that's in Saskatchewan, I'm building a cabin there. So anyway, if anybody's in my neighborhood, let me know.
I'll reach out to Graham for your contact information, because I frequently go through Red Deer, and we'll have a coffee.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks. Freedom Combo. David.
Hey, very simple Podbean. I got about 100 episodes of just mostly me doing things, multimedia presentation. I call it an art project, and it's free. And I have a co-host once in a while, maybe 10% of all the episodes. He's there. He's a friend of mine. Hitman is his name. And other than that, I have a Rumble channel where I do my interviews and I put them up in video. But it's basically a lot of audio stuff. Yeah, media, whatever, philosophy, whatever's going on, psychology, lots of stuff. I think that's it. Yeah, the
Thanks.
Freedom Convo
Thanks.
podcast. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Darren.
I'm Darren from Grand America, and you guys missed all the chats. The chats were fire. People were fighting. I think they're accusing each other of smoking crack. We had a bunch of different audiences converge in the chat, so it was interesting to watch. And I was kind of laughing. I was wondering why you guys weren't laughing, but then I remembered I was the only one who can see the chat.
Only one that can see them. Yeah.
So anyway, no, this was fun. I mean, it was. There's always going to be a bit of arguing because we all think different things, and we all obviously are very opinionated. Otherwise, we wouldn't have these shows.
None of us are the 60%, man.
Exactly. Everyone here is after it, and I respect that. So I don't, whether I agree with everyone or not, I respect that everyone's getting after it and trying to make a difference and do what they think. I think I would like to end it with, we had Gordon White on the show years ago, probably right at the start of COVID. And his advice was to sort of, hey, just take like the first, or take the top 3 things that you think might go wrong with the world and prepare for them as best you can. And then get on with your life. And, that then you can kind of at least try and find some happiness in the collapse. Cause I do agree with Zach. It is all coming down. I run with a bunch of freezers and all the shit stashed. I'm a pretty heavy prepper, but it's still fun. It's like we got memes, we got laugh, and we got this crazy internet so we can have conversations like this and at least chat with each other through the claps, as long as we can keep this on, and maybe we'll pull up yet. So yeah, thanks for coming on the show, guys. We appreciate it. Grimerica.ca for our other show, adultbrain.ca for all the audiobooks we do, contact at the cabin for the trips. And I think that's it. We love you guys. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.
Hey, greatly appreciated meeting all of you, and thanks for giving